Hello, everyone. Welcome to Developing Palates. I'm Aaron Loomis coming to you from the Drew Estate Studio. With me today is Jiunn Liu, and from the Powstanie Studio, John McTavish. How you guys doing?
Good man. It feels weird
Wonderful.
not to be doing recap videos though. We're doing we're doing a
Yeah,
live show, which
exactly.
we do occasionally. So have to be on my relatively good behavior, unlike the live recaps.
Yep, yep. How about you, June? How you doing?
I'm great. I'm going to Maui on Saturday for a week, so I'm excited
Oh,
to do that.
I'm June. I'm going
Well,
to
there you
Maui. I'm
go.
so
Yeah,
fancy.
and I haven't
Fancy
been on a
schmancy.
vacation in 6 years.
Oh, okay. Well, now I feel. Thank you. Now I feel like a jerk. Thank you for that.
First vacation was NOLA for PCA in 6 years at this company, at my
Okay,
company.
there you go.
So, no,
Very cool. All right, so yeah, as John alluded to, we're doing something a little bit different tonight. We are doing our annual PCA recap show. And we have the exact same group of guys that we had on the show last year, which is nice for them to be able to repeat their visits and take time out of their schedule to join us. So I'm gonna thank to these guys, but I'm gonna introduce everybody kind of as they're showing up on my screen. So no particular order, just whatever I see. And first is in the top left is Jay Davis from Blue Smoke of Dallas and also a PCA board member. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Uh, Below him is William Cooper from Cigar-Coop. How you doing, Coop?
Hey, what's going on? I'm actually showing myself to the right of Jay, so I don't know.
Yeah,
On the screen.
it's my screen's a little different, so
Yep.
we'll just go that way.
Okay. Yep.
Next to Coop is Mike Szczepankiewicz from Powstanie and Cigar Hustler and whatever else you're got your hands in at the moment. So how you doing, Mike?
Nicely done, man. On the name, on the
Thank you.
brand, all of
Thank you.
it.
Thank you.
Mikey, you launching a wine brand anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm
Asking
I'm
for friends.
I'm gonna partner with Pete Johnson. I don't know, and we're gonna go wine, fully wine.
Nice.
All right,
Nice.
nice. And last but not least is Steve Saka from Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust. Steve, welcome tonight.
Well, I'm already in the wine business, so I don't even understand what we're talking about here. It's like that's my status quo. That's my
There you go.
norm.
Yeah. All right, so we all got back from New Orleans. First show back there since 2015. So that was nice 10-year gap to get back there. Before we get into any of the details of the trade show itself, I just kind of wanted to kind of go back to what everybody's thoughts were kind of leading up to the trade show. So, last year we had the first date change, so we had, moved it up to March. Now it was April, but it was still Vegas. Now this year it's going to New Orleans. So, kind of leading into the show, let's talk about, let's say, 2 weeks before the show, before the tariffs get announced. What were your guys' thoughts kind of leading into it? What were you expecting was going to happen? What were you wanting to have happen? And kind of, I'll leave it open to Jay, Mike, or Steve to kind of add their thoughts on that.
Jay, you go.
Well, I was hoping that it would not rain, so I
Okay.
was constantly checking the weather, and I felt like if it didn't rain, we had a shot at a really good show.
Mhm.
Is it
Okay.
normally rainy in New Orleans in April?
No, it's the least rainy month of the year.
Okay.
All
Of
right.
course, it was thunder
Maybe
showering the
fair shot
week
then. It
after.
wasn't like all right. I don't know. I didn't check. I
Yeah.
How about you, Mike? What were your kind of thoughts heading into New Orleans?
I was excited about having the show on this coast, man. I'm Vegas out. I
Yeah.
can't just the flight alone is just brutal. And the as far as accessibility, New Orleans, we drove. It wasn't that bad. It's about 8.5 hours. I love that. I didn't have to deal with TSA. I didn't have to deal, with none of that. I
Right.
got to load up everything. I didn't have to worry about logistics for any additional crap at the end where you mess things up. I'm like, oh, we're gonna need this extra or whatever. We had it all ready to go, and we drove. So was happy that it was. I don't care where it is. I just prefer East Coast
Right.
over any. So
All right, Steve, what were your thoughts kind of leading up to the show?
um So I think for most of us in the industry, Q1 was a relatively bad quarter.
Mhm.
So I think you were kind of coming into a show that I don't think was necessarily the best to a lot of our retailers. Um, in fact, I knew it was going to be a really bad quarter because of what happened last year. So I had strategically planned a couple drops
Mhm.
in January and then February, and then one that was supposed to hit before the show, the year of the Duque, that didn't quite make it. But they actually made my Q1 really, really nice because I wanted to take the pressure off going into the trade show financially because
Mhm.
there's nothing worse than going into a trade show and having to feel like you have to make numbers. So I kind of planned for it. I personally was probably the most behind I've ever been going into a trade show. I bit off too much. I had too many new products and too many balls in the air. So I had a really miserable lead up to the trade show. And I also kind of learned that, so last year I didn't launch a lot at the trade show. It was relatively easy. This year I had a lot. And then I realized how difficult the April schedule is for me
Right.
because the factories and the box makers and everybody really don't want to work on anything seriously new starting in November because they just want to close out their year and catch up with what they're behind on. And then you shut down mid-December and then they open up early January, but not really until mid-January because they need that first week to kind of get going again. And then of course it ended up right on the heels of that was Pearl Sabor. So I really kind of in my in my head, I thought I had November, December, January, but really you don't have November, December, January. They're almost non-existent from a develop, at least for who I deal with. I
Right.
found it really hard. So I went in this show pretty scattered, to be honest with
Mhm.
you. It was probably the messiest we came into a trade show.
Right. All right, Coop. How about you? What were your thoughts leading into this trade show?
I was actually optimistic because I don't think they could have done a worse job than back in 2015 when it was in New Orleans last time. Nor did I think they could do a worse job than the Cigar Con debacle of 2019. It seemed like they were doing a lot of planning and preparation. When I say they, the PCA, the executive staff, the board, they really seemed like they were doing their homework. And in fact, I know I talked to Jay. There was kind of like a reconnaissance trip down there. So it seemed like they were looking at every detail. And I had no reason to believe that they couldn't pull off a good show in New Orleans. I still question if the move to the spring is paid off. I think we'll know in the next few years as it kind of settles in at this time. But you can't, like I said, I really was more optimistic as far as this trade show goes because I've seen some bad ones and those were just not planned well. This one was being planned very well.
Right. And then John and June, I know June, this is a 6-year window since your last trade show, so you probably had different expectations than everybody else. But what were your kind of thoughts leading into New Orleans? Because New Orleans, the previous New Orleans show was one of the ones you attended. So
Yeah, my very first trade show was the 2015 show, actually,
yeah.
that I went with you. But yeah, I haven't been in 6 years. The last one I went to, I think it was in 2018 in Vegas. I didn't have a lot of expectations. I kind of treated it as I've been gone for so long, and I'm just going to go into the booths and just introduce myself because
Right.
it's been so long.
Yeah. What about you, John?
Yeah. I was there in 2015. I didn't think the show was bad. I just think the timing was lousy, and there was a lot working against the trade show in 2015. It was very hot, and the PCA had at the time fight looming legislation of anti-smoking, which kind of caught the trade show off guard. So I think overall the 2015 show was fine, but it wasn't great. I think what I was looking forward to in 2025 is, like Coop said, I think there was a lot of work clearly that started the year before and not 3 months before of making sure this is going to be a successful show with outreach programs to retailers, the people that are actually going to attend the show and spend money. There's a lot of work put in the gala, which I think is maybe under appreciated for how much energy it brings into the show. Because if you have a really good gala, I feel like it brings a lot of energy to the show. And as Coop can definitely attest to, like Jay, I mean, I was doing a weather forecast every 2 days. Like I was like,
Yeah.
oh, it looks like rain on Friday. Okay, looks like we're safe. Oh, it looks like rain on Friday again. Okay, it looks like we're safe. And that was really, I think, the only thing that in my mind could impact the show in a measurable way is if, because of the environment of New Orleans versus Vegas, if we got a bunch of thunder showers on sort of Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday, that can make people cranky. It didn't work out that way, which is great, but that was the only thing I think that I was at all remotely concerned about. And obviously the ridiculous flight, because unlike Mike, I don't live on the East Coast. I live on the West-ish coast, and it's a hella long ways for me to go. What about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I was interested to see because I didn't go to Vegas last year, so I didn't get to do the date change thing. So it was my first time with a different time of the year. Going back to New Orleans, I was curious to see what the PCA was going to do for New Orleans. I think that was my biggest thing. I mean, the trade show itself, I don't think the location matters much. I mean, you're just in a big box with however they lay out the booths, and that's that, right? It's going to be all the stuff that kind of is around it that changes what things look like. So, um, yeah, I was just kind of curious what they were going to do around the events and things like that. So, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But right before the trade show, the tariffs get announced, and I'll just kind of we don't need to go around the room, but did this did this change anybody's thoughts leading into the trade show about like, is this gonna like Jay, is this gonna change your buying for Mike and Steve? Do you think this is gonna change, what people are buying from you or what you're gonna be buying, Mike? Like, did this have any kind of effect on you guys leading into it?
Jay?
Got to unmute Jay.
Yeah,
Are we gonna
for
have
me,
a lot more
definitely.
shows?
Well, I was coughing earlier, so
Fair.
I went a lot deeper than I normally would with some of my consistent brands, and then there were other sub brands that I don't usually focus on. Good examples like Havana Q from JC Newman. I went a little deeper there. I went deeper with JFR. I went deeper with like Nicaragua. So a lot of the cigars that are in that $5 to $8 price range. And I was trying to figure out the tariffs, and Steve gave us some guidance that it would probably be at 10% from Nicaragua, and then I'm thinking through packaging. So I was preparing myself with that, and I spent a lot of time talking to my consumers. What do you think? Would you rather pay a flat fee for the tariffs, maybe reduce box discounts? And what I heard a lot from my customers was try to bring in some less expensive cigars. So as a result, I think that there were some newer companies that had higher priced initial offerings that I didn't pay a lot of attention to. And then for the new brands I brought in things that I thought were more appropriately priced. It's one thing if you're going to bring in an expensive cigar from Steve Saka or from, Fuente or from Padron, but it's a little more difficult if it's a newer brand and their first cigar is $22. So I was looking for more of that newer brand that maybe had a $12 or $13 price point. And, like I said, certain things like Nicaragua or Brick House or Chateau Fuente, things that sell well to begin with, went deeper on those because might as well get them cheaper so I can delay raising prices.
Right. So Steve or Mike, did it change your outlook at all when the tariffs got announced and everybody was kind of like sharing their own
Well,
thoughts
other
on
than
what's
the
going on?
annoyance of it all, I mean, look, it was just so topsy-turvy there in the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, my understanding is there's a 10% tariff now, but I haven't paid it yet. So my attitude's always been the same. Once I'm assessed a tariff and I have to pay the bill, which I'm assuming is going to be on the next container that's going to clear, which should be in about 2 weeks. I just basically figured out the math of what it would actually cost increase wise. And I was doing the number based on 18, 19%. It was going to basically mean I was going to have a 10% price increase to pass the tariff on at no profit margin. And I had already relayed that to my retailer. So assuming I end up paying a 10% tariff, it will end up being somewhere around a 5% rough increase that will increase the prices. I'm not going to eat the tariff, but I won't profit on the tariff. I don't make enough profit to eat the tariff. Now, if we were talking about the tariff was going to be in place for 2-3 months, then I could eat it, right? It would suck, but I could
Yeah.
do it. But if we're talking long term, ongoing, it would help me a lot if I had a lot more inventory, because then I would have a lot of pre-tariff inventory that I could float on, but I really don't. So, I mean, for the volume that we sell, I basically am lucky if I have 4 to 6 weeks at any one time in the United States. And on some things, I have zero, the bigger movers, the ones that move the fastest.
Mhm.
So those are going to be the ones that obviously are going to be instantly hit with a tariff. I may feel a little bit less concerned about it because I'm kind of in a price point where I think even I know the retailers are going to margin my 5% increase if that's what it turns out to be. But I know that someone isn't going to stop smoking one of our cigars because it ends up being $1.10 more on the retail shelf. They're going to complain about it, but that's not going to move a guy that's smoking Syncomp or Miso or Molester to Saka or any of my exclusive drops, and he's going to go, oh wow, it's now $10 more a box. It's just not going to do anything. So I feel a little tariff protected as long as it's a reasonable tariff. I think the bottom end is where it gets really ugly because the tariff is assessed before S-chip valuation. For those of you guys that aren't familiar, that was the way user fees were done too. User fees came after S-chip valuation, and that seems to be the way the tariff is going to be implemented. So there's a lot of like really low-end bundle products that are currently paying, maybe only 19 or 22 cents an S-chip. But if they get hit with the tariff, now their S-chip is also simultaneously going to go up on those two. The only thing that I have a little bit of a concern of is if I only raise the price for what the tariff exactly costs me, it's also going to mean that when and if the tariff goes down, I'm going to be a little screwed because I won't be able to drop the added tariff expense right away because the inventory I do have, I will have paid the higher price on. Where if I just said, okay, I'm going to raise the prices 10%, then I'm making margin on the tariff. So when the tariff goes away, it's much easier for you to go, oh, okay, no problem, no more tariff. So I'm a little bit, I may find myself in a bit of a pickle. I think I'm doing the right thing in the front end, but 8-9 months from now, if the tariff goes to zero, I'm going to probably have a lot of consumers like, why aren't you lowering your price? And I'm going to have to explain that, look, I didn't take profit in the front end, but I have all this inventory that I pay tariff on, and therefore I've got to work through it. And of course, it just depends how much inventory I have, right?
Yeah.
Tariff goes away in 4 to 6 weeks. I'll just eat that loss, right? I can do that. I just can't eat it on an ongoing basis, month after month after month. There isn't that type of gross margin. And I think because I had emailed our retailers and kind of explained my logic to them, I think it cut down on a lot of the tariff conversations that a lot of other people may have been having with their manufacturers, because most people are just kind of like deer in the headlights and just kind of waiting to see what everybody else does. And since I had already come out of the gate and said, this is what I'm doing for good or bad, we can argue it. I think that kind of made it a little easier for me. And then, of course, the price delta, I feel a little protected from the tariff. It's going to hurt me on Umbagog more. It's going to hurt me more on Popetta. I mean, that's where you're going to feel the biggest pinch. But I don't think that the guy that's smoking a Saka Khan, he's going to complain, but it's not going to not smoke a Saka Khan because it's 85 cents more.
Right. And then Mike, since you kind of have both sides, you have your brand owner point of view and the retailer point of view. You kind of have it looking at it multiple ways. So how did it have an effect on you going into the show?
Yeah, for me, it was a status quo, to be honest. This isn't the first time we've seen this, one way or the other. FDA fears loomed, S-chip fears loomed. All of these things have kind of happened, right? This is just another thing. So it didn't change. I had honestly no opportunity to really buy this show, and which was kind of surprising for us. We had the most appointments that we've ever had. I guess, it shouldn't be a surprise to me. It's just always, it's kind of humbling.
Right.
As far, we also just received a big allocation of Powstanie product a few weeks prior. So we're in a pretty good position where it isn't something that we necessarily need to focus on at this moment. And it just feels like a C or a D problem for me, and
Yeah.
I'm working on A and B right now. So I didn't want to focus on it. I didn't want the fear to be implemented. I've seen people on social media rattle off about how all their expertise, which I find extremely comical because nobody really knows. And you feel for the guys that got whacked really hard for the percentages right off the rip. They, like Black Label got instantly hit, right?
Mhm.
I'm like, damn, that sucks. But in general, I'm just kind of you just kind of take it as it's coming, to take the punches, and you kind of keep moving forward. I think Steve's 100% accurate. If a person's buying a $14 or $15 cigar, it's not going to affect that consumer too much.
Right.
I'll tell you where I have an actual real tariff problem right now. I have a container of 10,000 Saka cons and smoking Sasquatch statues on the water inbound from Asia. And I think when they land, the tariff is going to absolutely crush them, that you're going to have to buy like $1 billion of Dunbarton cigars to get a Saka Khan statue, because they are just instantly like a total. I already spent like $3 more to make a fancier statue. And now
Yeah.
I found that I'm spending 100. And we had 145% today. I don't even know where we are. What was the last True Social post?
185.
1,000,006.
Where are we at?
That was 185.
185. There you go. So if I end up paying if I end up paying 185% tariff, I got a real problem on Saka Khan statues. I really have no clue how I'm going to give those things away, because they just became so absurdly expensive. It's crazy.
$700.
But here's the funny part. I can't even get my freight forwarders to agree. I use three different freight forwarders, and I can't even get them to agree as to whether I'm going to pay the tariff based on the departure date that's on the bill of lading when the cargo actually got processed, or if I'm going to pay the tariff based on the date when it actually goes to clear customs. So I have these three people that I've been relying on for two of them for more than 2 decades. One's a relatively new one, and this is what they do for a living, and they can't give me that simple answer. They disagree. So I'm pretty much of the mindset that when it lands, I'm going to get a bill, because that's the way it works. You get the bill and you have to pay the bill, or they don't release the cargo. So when I see what the bill is, I'll see what the bill is, and I'm just going to deal with it. But yeah, so my biggest tariff problem right now is that Saka cons. They're ridiculous.
My favorite conversation was at the LE Blue booth, because I guess even though there's some agreements going on with the European Union, they said that France was going to impose certain things on them, and they said they had to change their price list 6 times the week before the trade show, and they looked pretty frazzled in the booth.
I can
Yeah,
imagine,
that I do know there was more chaos with
I'll tell you, I don't know if you
accessories.
guys had this conversation, but I think one of the biggest missed stories of the tariff are all the manufacturers that are large that have bonded warehouses. I mean, that tariff announcement put them into a total scramble, because look, when you have a bonded warehouse, you try to keep like 90% of your stuff in bond and 10% in your distribution warehouse, and you move things over on a weekly basis as you need them. And that's when you would pay the FDU user fee, which we're not paying right now. And that's also when you would pay the S-chip tax. So there's an advantage to having the bonded warehouse, because it allows you to have inventory and not pay those additional costs until you have to move it. Well, when the tariff got announced a week before the trade show, all the companies that have large bonded warehouses, they instantly freaked out, because they're saying everything I have in my bond is either 10% more expensive or 18 or slash 19% more expensive. And it put them into a total scramble of how do you come up with the cash if you don't have the cash, which then has you talking to your bank, right? And of course, everybody else that's a big company is talking to their bank, because they all have bonded warehouses, regardless of what industry you're in. And on top of that, what do you do with the product? Because you're set up to keep the vast majority of your inventory in the bonded warehouse. And now you have to move it to another location. And in our case, it has to be a humidified, temperature controlled environment. So I think a lot of the big guys, they were in a mad scramble that week before the trade show, trying to figure out what the hell are we doing.
Yeah. All right, so then we get to Friday, April 11th, which is the kind of the seminar day, opening gala day. And if something happened before that, please jump in and let me know if it was noteworthy. We could talk about it. But I'll kind of walk
Yeah,
through
convention services is slow as water, man. They're slow.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. was like milk gravy in the veins, like literally. Like I can't even explain how I had forgotten how slow everybody was in Louisiana. I really did. I somehow blocked it out, but no, it was insane. In fact, the same work we get two guys to do in about 2.5 hours. It took five guys 6 hours to do. It was
Wow,
insanity. Oh yeah.
crazy.
Oh, that's it. Other than that,
All right.
perfect.
So, June, John, and myself, we got to the convention center. What did we get there? Noonish?
Yeah, noonish.
Noonish. All right. So we wanted to go in and get our badges. Uh, First person we see is Mike. Get to say our hellos. We walk in. We're greeted by this amazingly long line for check-in. And I was like, this is wild. What's going on here?
Oh, it's the
So we,
milk gravy in the veins.
yeah,
That's what
so
it
we
is.
walk over to the back of the line.
Because they have
You
the same
know,
problem that I had, right? They
yeah,
had plenty of staffing from every trade show they've ever done before. They just didn't figure in the NOLA effect
yeah,
of just how much slower
Yeah.
everybody moves. I mean, it was crazy. So
yeah,
I can't even blame the PCA for that one. Now
right.
they know.
No.
Next year
Yeah,
they're going to
I
staff differently because
yeah,
there's just no way to plan for that.
yeah. So we go to the back of the line, and I'm like, something's not right. Something's really not right here. So I told John, I'm gonna take a walk. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. So I walked down just to see because I wanted to see what line we were in, and it was the exhibitor line. So there's the media line and retailer line, and there's nobody in line. So I come get the guys. We run over there. We do our check-in. Say hi to a bunch of people that are in the exhibitor line. Just a tip for next year for any of the media companies that do interviews, go on check-in day. You can do all your interviews while they're waiting in line to get their badges. You'll clean up. It'll be done. You'll have half your trade show back. It'll be perfect. But we got that done. We went outside, had a cigar. I thought that being able to smoke right outside there was pretty cool. Like it was
That was a
good
nice job they
chance.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good chance to just kind of step out. You can have a cigar if you wanted to, in between whatever you were doing. I know Mike just had all those guys waiting in line for him, so he was just kind of chilling out outside. So that's a smart move too.
Yeah, it
So,
wasn't 98 degrees and 95%
yeah, I
humidity,
mean,
so that didn't hurt.
beautiful weather to just kind of, and you're in the shade under that, that big
They had real chairs. They had
columns,
real
stuff like
lounge
that.
chairs there. Yeah.
Yeah, not a lot of chairs though.
But they had some. It was at
Yeah.
least a step in the right direction, I thought.
Yeah. So, overall, kind of a good start to things. I feel bad for all the exhibitors in the line. That was horrible. They got to figure out how to fix that next year. So, I don't know why they wouldn't just start pulling people over to the other booth where there was nobody checking in. I mean, just drag them over there and get it moving. But
You
then
missed
it
about
was
the milk gravy part.
Yeah.
It affects the brain too.
yeah.
It's all that fried food and milk gravy, man.
Yep.
So then it was seminars. So it was hand rolled, then the governor, and then the future cigar makers, then the annual meeting, and then the Guy Fieri kind of sit down with Dave Savone and Eric Espinosa. I thought the hand rolled thing is a great tradition if they can actually keep producing films on an annual basis and have them ready for the show. I think that's a really good energizer. I would maybe move it to the middle or the end of the seminar day and not kind of kick it off with it.
I agree with that too.
But it was a bit of a bummer that the last 15 minutes of it got cut off because the governor got there early and needed to go up right away.
It was a bummer.
So
I mean, to be fair though,
how
how often are political people on time for anything? So I think that caught everyone by off guard. Like, what? He's not on time. He's early. What?
I didn't see him, but I gotta tell you, I'm impressed that any governor would actually show up at anything cigar. So
yeah,
gotta give
any lit up on
I
stage.
assume it's a man, right?
And
Yes.
the cigar came from the Coop team that he was smoking.
Oh, nice.
So what happened is
Really?
Josh had asked Ben for a cigar because he didn't have one right before the show. So Ben gave him an Opus X. And then the governor went to Josh saying, I need a cigar. The only cigar that Josh had was the Opus X. Now, we didn't notice until Josh told us this afterwards that the governor was smoking Ben's cigar. So
Nice.
we found afterwards it was Ben's cigar, yeah. He said
Did
that was
he
the only
smoke
cigar
it?
he had. Yeah, yeah, he lit it up.
I mean, he lit it up.
I know he lit it up, but
I don't
did he
think he
smoke
ever
it?
got a draw out of it, but he tried.
I don't remember if it got dry. He lit it up. Yeah, I'll say that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a political speech. Like I think when Giuliani came in, it was much more politically charged, that speech. This one, a couple of little political daggers, but nothing major is what I'll say with that. I thought it was more welcoming everybody to the city and everything. Glad to have you here. And I thought it was a good job at the PCA getting, obviously the
State
highest state
governor at a
official.
PCA convention, I'd say that's a pretty big win.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you have to say it's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Although
wasn't like
who's
a
the
paid,
who's
it wasn't a paid keynote like Giuliani was. He came in.
But I
This
have
guy,
to
who's the guy?
imagine too, he was probably double dipping because that was Jazz Fest weekend too. So he's probably in the area,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it, but if you think about it scheduling wise,
he probably was down here, and he
I would
probably was
imagine
down
he
here.
was there for the last weekend of Mardi Gras, right?
Still didn't
This
have
is
to come.
kind of like
He
the
still didn't have to
official
come. Like,
closing.
yeah.
And
The one
then
thing I was
go ahead.
about to be with the opening, the front entry was cool with some of the tables and chairs. It was a little awkward with not having standing ashtrays around.
Yeah, because you had to ash while people were sitting down at a table.
Hey, you got to kind of walk up to something random, like, hey, like,
Yeah.
good to see you walking in now. Let me just throw this. Okay,
Yeah.
have a good one. It's just little details like that. I think, I mean, I'm that type of guy that looks at those little things, right?
Yep.
If you did these 3 or 4 parts different, it would have been I would have been like, oh my God, this is they thought of
Really, all
everything.
you need is a bucket with sand in it, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
If you had 6 galvanized buckets with sand in the bottom, that would have taken care of the problem.
right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. They drafted me to hand out Alandino cigars, and I looked at one of the convention people. I'm like, "Where are the ashtrays?" And you know what she said? We sweep the floors every night, just ash on the floor. And I was a little horrified and embarrassed that was the solution. Apparently, that comes with the sausage gravy in the veins. So yeah, we need to do a better job to have some ashtrays.
They don't think of how we're gonna get the negative connotation of us being
Yep.
slobs by us using the floor or the ground
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And you don't want to litter in somebody's city when
Yeah.
you're there as a guest. So
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want to just chuck the cigar as you're walking in, like, all right,
Right.
and it's weird walking onto a random table. Hey,
Yeah. After the governor spoke, then it was the Future Cigar Makers panel. I didn't attend that. Did anybody here attend that
who's on
session?
that?
I
Who's the
did.
future cigar makers? Who's on it?
It was I don't remember his name. One of the younger Placencian children,
Jose Luis
and
Plasencia.
yeah,
Okay.
and Lizette Carrillo and Klaus Kellner. The
Klaus.
Casado ladies are supposed to be there. I'm trying.
I'm working on it.
You
I
said
got
runs your
corrected on the
class,
floor,
right?
so yeah.
No,
Klaus,
no,
I'm
and
working
he
on it.
corrected me too. I hate to mispronounce people's names. That's why Mike will always
Same.
be Hustler to me because I'm not even going to try.
Yeah. So how was the session, Jay? You attended, I assume?
I thought it went well. I think Lizette did a good job talking about their first introduction to smoking. How is it like operating in the shadow of your father, or with Jose Luis with his older brother as well? Because there's a big age difference. I think 18 years, and I thought it was really good to see, because that's something I think that we talk about cigar companies being second, third, fourth, fifth generation. What is it like? When's the first time you realized that your dad or your mom was a big deal? And then, how do you live in that shadow, but then how do you grow into having your own? And I think that it was nice. I'm sure that if there were newer generational cigar blenders there, they would have appreciated that. So it was kind of cool to see their perspective of, oh, this is just my dad, and oh wow, my dad's a big deal, and oh, now I have to work in that shadow, and then I have to live up to those expectations, and then where am I going? So I thought that was cool. And I think they also talked about when's the first time you really smoked a cigar with your dad where you knew what you were doing. So I thought her questions and her moderation was, I'd say at her class level, she did a very good job. I was impressed.
Nice. After that was the annual meeting, and I would say that probably went as exactly like everybody would expect it to do.
I have a question. Jay,
yeah.
how well attended were these events? Because obviously I'm dealing with the Milk Gravy boys setting up the booth, so I have no clue
Yeah.
what's going on.
The room was basically full. There were a few tables that some of the media guys were at that emptied, but really it was pretty full. In fact, there were people standing in back.
Oh,
And
cool.
I don't
Good.
mean that as a shot towards media people. Obviously, media people got to do what they got to do, and manufacturers do what they have to do. But it was very well attended. Was it as well attended as last year? I don't know, but the last 2 years, significant, strong attendance all the way through. Whereas in the past, I don't think you saw that.
Yeah,
Good.
way better, I think, than even 2023. I'd say
I-
2023, you might have had 50, 60% attendance. And I would say anecdotally, Jay, we were over 80% capacity in the room for sure.
Yeah, hand
That's
roll
great
was
to
very
see.
well attended.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
after that it
Handrolled was
started to
full.
empty out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think that is, John? Do you think it's because retailers are more involved, or you think it's because there's less distraction in New Orleans as compared to Vegas, or do you think that we're getting more retailers that are buying into the message that it's not just a buying show, that there's other reasons to attend?
Well, this is all my opinion, so I look forward to the comments. But I think I think there's a few things. First of all, I think there's a number of new retailers that haven't attended the show in a while. There's a number of retailers that have never attended the show, and I think this is a great example of saying, let's give them a day zero experience that they've never had before or that they didn't know they were going to get. And it's kind of coming off the success of sort of last year and the year before, where I think the Friday could really set up the energy levels of this is not just a buying event, which obviously, the main focus is buying, but we're going to try and make this into more of a gala than just a convention. And so adding extra value of having the touch points with these people that they may not ever have a chance to talk to in person or hear them speak, along with the educational pieces. Like last year, we had Nick Melillo do a really good presentation. And then this year at the hand rolled. So a lot of them maybe have never seen the hand rolled. And I do think that having Guy as the bookend was smart because look, Guy is a major celebrity. And so if people are going to stick around for anything, and I agree with Aaron, I think hand rolled would be a good, sort of middle thing or even just before Guy to sort of keep that energy all the way to the end. Because I mean, I would have naturally expected people to sort of leave near maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes before the end to go get a spot for the gala event in the park. And it was still as full and possibly more full actually for the Guy interview than it was sort of halfway through the sessions. So I think there's a few things going on. I think, the PCA, in my opinion, not to blow too much smoke, but I think the PCA has done a great job of building on that and continuing to build on that based on feedback and based on successes. And I think they need to continue to do that because I think it's a great way to showcase stuff that retailers maybe weren't getting the benefit of in years gone by, and setting up the energy level for the trade show to, again, say this it's not just a writing orders trade show.
Yeah. And I would say, John, that, and not to disagree with my friend Alan Rubin, but I think that retailers fall into two groups. There are the group of people, they fly in Saturday and they fly out Sunday.
Right.
A lot
But
of people came in early for this show this year.
Right. But I think the people that come in early, I think, and I'm not trying to throw Alan on the thing. I think the reason in the past is we would do these, what I thought were stupid things, where we'd have some lawyer talk to us about the FDA
Right.
and we all be terrified.
Oh,
We
it's
talk
horrible.
about point of sale systems, or we talk about employee manuals. Honestly, the types of nuts and bolts you would think would make sense at a trade show, but people want to be entertained. And so we've moved away from that. And I think that it used to be, I mean, come on, how many people really, even though you should, how many people really care about how to do your HR system and a 401k plan? Although that might be useful for your business, people want to come there, they want to get a free cigar, they want to enjoy it. So I think as we've made the Friday less educational and more fun, I think people want to stay for it. And although I wish in a perfect world like Alan that, we could talk about nuts and bolts and different things like how to do an employee manual and this and that, I think moving away from that has encouraged people to want to attend. You want to hear Nick do a slideshow on Connecticut and the history of Connecticut. That's fascinating. You want to hear about Pete Johnson meeting Paping. You want to, hear Guy Fieri. And I think that because of the the information's a little bit more fuzzy and soft, I think that encourages participation as well.
To me, the whole day is just too boring. I know there's interesting information in some of these sessions, but it could use a lot more excitement. These sessions don't have to be one after the other. You can have sessions running at the same time on different topics. You can have more exciting things. You can have competitions going on, things like that run more than an hour, and people can roll in and out of them. Like there's a lot of things that can still be done. I think that would really raise the energy level. I think that this is just they've been stuck on this kind of format for so long of having these hour after hour after hour kind of sessions that just it's not exciting. But people don't leave because they sit down and they just can smoke, and that's fine. That's nice. But for us, like there's lots of places to shoot out, have lunch or whatever real quick and things like that too. So that there's nothing there that's exciting that's keeping us there. Like pretty much after hand rolled, we only came back because we finished lunch early, and then we were just kind of waiting to hang out until the party started. So it wasn't compelling. They weren't compelling sessions to kind of really keep us there.
I think in fairness, I personally found the sessions more interesting last year, but then I have to also acknowledge that I'm not the audience. I'm not a retailer. And so, I have to acknowledge that, like, putting on my retailer hat, some of that stuff might have been more interesting for me if I was still in the retail business. As a media member, maybe not so much.
Yeah. Here's an idea for next year, Jay. There's quite a few famous chefs in New Orleans that are big cigar smokers. I think given the importance of food in New Orleans, you might be surprised how many people would be interested in hearing from some of these quote unquote celebrity chefs.
I think that's a great idea. I know that back in the day when I used to go to the Big Smoke a lot, they would bring out a chef and he would cook something and then everybody could try it. I thought that was kind of cool and interactive. I wouldn't even mind a comedian. So I agree that we could definitely add flavor to that. I also like Aaron's idea about, maybe you do have some seminars that are more nuts and bolts and give people some options. I just think there's a reality that the PCA staff right now is 7 people, and we're going to grow our staff over time, and it would be good to focus on things like that.
That's a challenging day for the staff because they're dealing with all the problems.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody has, we had problems. Everybody has some sort of problem, and you end up falling back on the staff to, smooth things over with chefs or to smooth things over with whoever the convention service people, so it's a tough day because it's a big setup day that Friday.
You had 800 people that, despite the fact there was a $150 fine, showed up that day to register. I'm sure that there were issues that happened at booths where they couldn't get the coffee maker to work, or, they had to resurrect one of the workers from the dead. So people spread pretty thin. Though I do think the Guy Fieri thing worked. And I think it worked because Guy had a relationship with Dave. And I like the way that it ended with, Josh had told Guy not to swear. And then when it comes up, he goes, "Oh, that was fucking great." And then they had the double wide lead everybody to the party. I thought the way they executed that was well. But I agree that they could have some better programming, for lack of a better word, in the middle of the day.
Yeah, maybe, as staff becomes more available, maybe there's a potential to make the sessions itself have in the middle of the sessions a little bit smaller, and you have multiple sessions, so people want to attend a point of sale training can. And maybe, you have a blending seminar, you have a point of sale. You can have smaller groups, smaller breakout groups, and multiple sessions going to.
Most retailers that have it.
That was a terrible example.
They use it as a fancy cash register anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Listen, I could do an hour on point of sale systems and their value off the cuff, but somebody has to attend it. So,
can I comment on this?
Yeah, go for it.
So the Coop team has been on the recipient of a lot of abuse for not being at the Guy Fieri thing, and I want to address this and set the record straight.
Well.
And Mike, in particular, on your podcast, you completely misrepresented what we had said about the Guy Fieri thing. But you made it up. You made it up, okay? Because here's the deal. They said basically I was over the Guy Fieri thing. No, I wasn't over the Guy Fieri thing. I've been very clear that it's one of the greatest things to happen to the cigar industry. However, when a decision was made to give that to Cigar Aficionado, then you put that in their hands, and frankly, it's their gig at that point. It's their media conduit into them. They own it. We don't need to be a part of that at that point. And the Coop team has, we really had a rough week. It's a very physically challenging week for a lot of us. And we really needed some time to do some prep and just kind of do some things. So we did not go to that. But I want to make it clear that it's not because I am done with Guy Fieri. It's simply that if last year they did it with Huber and Ernie Correa. It was the same deal. It's their deal. It's not my deal. And oh, by the way, I just want to make a comment to the PCA, and I said this to Jay this morning. How many articles did Cigar Aficionado cover on their thing with Guy Fieri? There was nothing published. There was nothing very little on social media, if anything. But yet somehow the Coop teams expected to cover that. It seems like that makes no sense to me. If you're bringing aficionado and you gave them the key at that point, it's their responsibility to do it. You gave them the exclusive to do that. It's their responsibility. It ain't my team or me personally to do that. So I wanted to set the record straight. I don't know, Mike, where you got that information from, but it actually put me in a very difficult situation with the Espinosa folks. So it was very incorrect.
You're a very bad person, Mike.
I'm a,
Do you have a comment on that, Mike? Yeah,
I have.
But you do understand that Mike makes a career out of saying stupid shit.
Yeah, but this one was wrong. This was so wrong. And it actually, I have personal and business relationships with these companies, and then that kind of reflects back on me now. I mean, where you could have asked me the question, and I would have very clearly pointed you to the podcast where I said that comment.
So let me ask you something. Are you doing cigar media because you like the paycheck, or you're passionate about the cigar industry?
Probably, here's the deal. I don't know if I'm necessarily passionate about it anymore, but I ain't getting a big paycheck from this.
Okay, so then you have to have some passion about it, I would say, right?
Right.
Okay, so if you're passionate about the cigar industry, we could all kind of agree that Cigar Aficionado is not going to be the media source for the good consumer, right?
I hear the comment, Mike. Yeah, I hear the comment. Yes, they moved the needle. But at that point, why is my team taking the hit for not going there?
So if we're assuming that you're passionate about cigar media,
Yeah,
and we're assuming that Cigar Aficionado really isn't the number one organization for cigar news, wouldn't you want to cover Guy Fieri regardless?
we cover Guy Fieri in a ton of different other ways.
But wouldn't you want to be at that particular thing, his big showcase, to give additional exposure for probably the top celebrity that's the most dedicated in this industry that we have ever seen?
For what reason?
Because you're
what am I getting? That's their gig.
And
That's
you're
their
trying
gig.
to do a good thing.
Were you there as a media?
No.
Okay. So why is it I don't understand why this falls on me, is what I'm saying. Because again, I'm not going to write about what they're doing. That's
Well,
right. That's all they're
And I
doing.
just want to point out, I don't think Half Wheel is there either, right? So I don't think Half Wheel covered.
And Mike, the answer is, I understand what you're saying, but the answer is we had to prioritize some stuff so we don't kill ourselves and put ourselves into a grave. We had to really time things out and prioritize things that we knew the next 3 days. And oh, by the way, we were more than willing to pay a visit behind the velvet rope, and do that. But we understand retailers are going to be there with guys, so we couldn't do that. And then I also heard the comment about, you said, well, I'm kind of bitter I didn't get access to Guy. Well, let me tell you something. Aaron Nielsen has Guy Fieri's number on speed dial, so we can get Guy anytime we want. So that wasn't the issue either. I mean, Aaron Nielsen knows everybody, so.
Gotcha.
That wasn't the case. It's just we had to make a call, and why am I going to go there and cover another media outlet that's not even covering it in their own publication?
Because
that makes no sense.
You're doing a good job, man. You really got in there, man.
I will say, as a complete aside, I haven't cared a lot of Espinosa the last few years, even though I used to be in Espinosa Lounge, because they haven't sold that well. I was so impressed with the guy's performance, and whether or not media was there or not doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That we brought the knuckle sandwich lines in, and I know what a great job Hector does. I have great respect for him.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, and I know I was one of the people that kind of gave you a hard time. I gave you a hard time.
You were not the only one though. We got it from a lot of angles.
But hey, we're friends, and friends can talk about things we disagree about. Steve and I have had similar conversations. And I understand. I mean, you have to take care of not just the media, but you have to take care of the 5 or 6 people on your team, and you were down a man to begin with. And so I understand, things come up. And all I'm saying is that I really thought it was magnificent.
I'm feeling bad now, though.
Why?
I'm just joking, man. I'm just throwing in a little more gasoline, for God's sake.
I will say this, Steve, if I'm not going to embarrass you, I don't remember what it was about, but 3 or 4 years ago, Steve and I were talking about something. We got into a situation where I think we were both upset. And Steve's like, look, you need to understand that I'm running a family-owned business, just like you. And I think that argument made us stronger friends and definitely helped our business relationship, where we just expressed things that were frustrating us about each other. And, sometimes these things, can build strength in a situation. And I think I feel closer to Steve and more connected with him and his product and his team because of that.
You and Mike are going to end up dating.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Now,
Mazel tov.
now, I think PCA should be given all the credit for bringing Guy in. Absolutely, that was a right move to make.
My question is,
you bring in Mike said the biggest celebrity. They brought the biggest celebrity in.
What Mike said, because if you just look at his shorts, he always keys the most incendiary.
Well, Mike, I want to talk about the fact that you said Josh Zaberski is only 3 foot tall.
I think that was Palmer that said that.
I know.
Hey, Coop, it's a question for you. So within the Guy Fieri thing, what I'm hearing is you think that it was a great idea to bring him in and have him talk, right?
Absolutely.
So how would you have run this that would have been equitable and fair?
You have a media guy on the PCA who does pretty good interviews, Antoine. I would have had him do it. Do it. He's had a podcast, or have Josh do it. I know they're busy, but you're bringing in the biggest celebrity in there.
Well, I also have to understand, what does Guy Fieri want out of it, and what does Eric Espinosa want out of it, and so it's not.
That's fine. But then I have to prioritize what I'm doing.
But I will say, in defense of the PCA, the idea was, well, first of all, Dave Savona has a relationship with Guy Fieri. The idea was we wanted Cigar Aficionado to do a live stream with their current cover, and it just worked out that Marvin allowed Guy Fieri to be on the cover. And that was the idea behind it. But I do agree that I think that other media should have a chance. I would love to see Coop and Bear interviewed, like Tom Lazuka or somebody like that. I think there should be places for other media organizations, not just Cigar Aficionado. But to get their cover was great.
I think Mike's interview would be far more fiery.
I'm down 100%. And Coop, just for the record, I forgive you. It's okay.
I forgive you too for making up. I forgive you for making up for your audience. Because you made all that up. You made all that up.
And you have next year. You can do better. We expect Guy Fieri coverage from Coop, and you're going to do it. And I believe in you.
Will this argument be in the Patreon?
All right. So we finally make it to the opening.
Deferring that.
So it was nice. We just get to walk across the street outside, beautiful weather. So
with a band.
That's right.
That was cool.
Mike, did you attend the gala? Okay, so I think everybody here except for Mike.
Well, you didn't report on that?
No, we didn't. I wasn't there either.
Coop, you didn't as well.
Unfortunately, as much as I would love to cover it as cigar media, the cigar media thing for me is third on the list when it comes to priorities as PCA.
Right.
For one, I'm selling product. For two, I'm buying product if I can. And then for three, I'm doing interviews or whatever for the podcast, which I didn't do any of that at all because there was legitimately zero time for me.
Yep.
So I'm
just giving you a hard time.
No,
I was just glad that we didn't have gas station nachos and that we had some decent food.
I heard the food was very good, and it was good job.
Yeah,
the food was good at opening
excellent.
night. Yes.
Listen,
go ahead.
You do. No, you go.
The high water mark for me, because I've been attending since 2013, I think the high water market for me, and there's been some good galas, but I think personally I felt the 2023 gala was the best up until this year. The 2023 gala was the best. I think it showcased what a gala could be. It's a must-attend event where you have exhibitors that people want to see that generate excitement. Having Guy there obviously doesn't hurt. Having brands that people are excited about. I think the food in 2023 is great. I think 2025, I was holding my breath because I was like, look, that's a lot to go above. And I think in every aspect, it exceeded 2023. So the lines were better organized. The food stations were better organized. The food was better. There was a lot more people that got in. There was no long lineup to get in. No one was in a big long line just to get into the festival.
The quality of the bar was unreal.
The bar was unreal. The only complaint I have, and it's minor, and I got to have a complaint because I'm Cigar Media, was there should have been a big flashing sign saying oysters back here. And it was like the secret of the, no one knew about the Gala and the oysters until Jiunn sniffed it out.
Know they could get those oysters, man. That line would have been crazy.
Oh,
yeah, I missed
nuts.
that too.
Yeah.
And I will add that I was disappointed personally that Villiger ran out of cigars. I mean, you're the largest conglomerate that sells cigars in Central Europe, and you're a multi-billion-dollar company. They could have brought a few more cigars. And I know people that were upset that they couldn't get them. I got one, and
how really
did
they run out though, Jay? I mean,
huh?
I know we gave away all the cigars we had, but it was like we were already like an hour and 45 minutes.
But they ran out a half an hour into the event.
Oh yeah, they weren't prepared. They just didn't know.
But I mean, I was excited because the cigar that you had, that was another thing, Steve. I'll compliment you that you have a lot of good cigars, but you gave away your newest banger, and
because I want to sell that shit the next 3 days, dude.
Oh, well, Espinosa did it too. So. Espinosa did it as well with their new one.
It's not a generosity thing. It's the first taste is free on the corner kind of approach, right?
But you could have given away the Umbagog Robusto, but you gave away the Fertenga, or however it's pronounced. Yes. That obviously cost you more. And as putting my retailer hat aside, my PCA hat aside, and as a cigar consumer, I was totally geeked that you had that cigar. And as a retailer, I got an extra ticket for the watch, although it didn't matter because I bought so damn much. But that was a cool add-on.
When you figure out the cost of giving away the really nice cigar compared to a less nice cigar, it probably added a total of $1,500. You know what I mean?
But have you been to it?
It's about what the extra cost is $1,500, and you're already so far in for a penny. You might as well be in for a pound. I mean, why? How many of us go to cigar?
Why spend?
So the PCA, we were one of the 4 co-sponsors. So our cut of the PCA, we all divided equally. So the Gala, my cut of the Gala was $14,000 to sponsor it, right? So everybody paid $14,000. I think it's one of the reasons why the Gala is nice, because you end up with diversity of products and a lot of companies. And it also makes it more feasible where 4 companies can afford to do it, where if one company had to absorb the entire 56, 60K, not counting the cigars that you're giving away, you really are pretty much limited to maybe 3 or 4 companies that could possibly actually sponsor the Gala. So when the PCA decided to allow having multiple sponsors at the same Gala, I think it brought a lot of other companies into the fold that could sponsor the Gala. I think it makes it more interesting for the retailers and the other exhibitors that are there that attend the Gala to come, because you're going to get a diversity of cigars. And I think it also helps to increase the energy level, because you have everybody trying to put something forward, to make themselves stand out at the Gala. We gave away a crappy sticker, but hey, that's what we do. But we did give a good cigar with the sticker. But I think the formula of having multiple sponsors on the Gala is a winning formula, rather than having one single big vendor do the entire Gala. I think it helps everybody personally.
I agree. I personally think, as a PCA board member, that you all should pay more. I don't know if you know this, but the Gala is somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 to $300,000. The PCA picks up the rest of that cost. So you basically paid for a quarter or a fifth of it. And I'm not complaining. That's great. I appreciate the sponsorship. And hopefully
you'll set the price. You'll set the price higher, and then we'll decide whether we want to do it or not.
Right.
I mean, it's just that simple.
Jay, was there any priority points will help?
Was there any consideration of expanding it beyond 4? Is it 4? Was there for a reason maybe why you kept it at 4?
I don't know. I know that Eric was sort of the primary point person. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. I think Eric like collected the money from the other three.
Yeah, Eric paid just to make things easier so the PCA doesn't have to chase everybody.
Right.
I cut Eric the check in 2023. I cut Eric the check in 2025. It just makes it easier. Um, yeah, I mean, it seems like four is a good number because you also have to think about how quick are the people going to be able to get to all the stations, right? So I think if you have too much, it's a little bit overwhelming. I think given the current cost, look, if they raise the price to where it's going to be 125 to sponsor the gala, then you might have to open up to 6 or 7 people, right, to sponsor it. So I think that that's also a determining factor. I know that at the current price to sponsor the gala, it's reasonable for 4 mid-sized companies to be able to afford to do that. Because if you think about, because like we don't do a dinner or a party, so it's the money that you would have spent on a dinner or a party or something else, you spend it there. It kind of works out well for us because it kind of leads into our watch drawing thing where everybody that comes to the gala, it basically gets an extra free ticket into the drawing. So it kind of, but I don't know. I don't even know what the other 3 booths gave away. I don't know what Buffalo Trace did or Villiger or Eric. I know Eric had Guy there taking photos and doing the rope line thing.
Yeah, they gave away their new knuckle sandwich Puro. So same.
So they
same
gave away
idea.
their new thing too.
Yeah.
What was Villiger give? What was the? You guys remember what the Villiger cigar was? I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
1888.
I didn't get
something
one.
like
They
that.
ran out after a half hour, I've been told.
Yeah, the 1888 Nicaragua.
So that was not really maybe it was a newer size. I think they may have had, but yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
I'm surprised at that because Villiger's been around the block with sponsoring events in the past. So that one kind of surprised me that they would fall that short. Just
Yeah,
because
it shocked me
they've
as well.
done this rodeo before, yeah.
Hey,
I think why I would find it surprised, maybe they didn't get the cigars, right? Because look, you have logistical problems.
Yeah.
But I know that they were under the understanding that we all kind of planned on having about 1,500 cigars available because we had 2 meetings prior, one on Zoom with the event planner and Lisa, and so I think they knew the number. Something obviously got lost in translation. Maybe something
Yeah.
didn't arrive in time.
Yeah, I can see that.
And
Because
I
like I
want
said,
to
they
thank
usually have been pretty good in the past at
Because I
sponsoring
don't
stuff.
see Villiger being cheap on the cigars. That doesn't
No,
mean
I
that.
don't either. That's why I'm
No.
saying I remember they did
Could
a
be
TPE
logistical.
event one year. They did a huge TPE event one year, so yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
I
it
give you
is
credit to New Orleans too. The One of the things we have to operate on is what they call an F&B schedule, the amount of money we spend on food and beverage. And we had to jump through a couple hoops, and the convention center worked with us. So the money spent on that event for alcohol counted towards our F&B, which that saved the organization money to help us with our fight with the FDA. So that was very much appreciated. New Orleans was very willing to work with us despite their mayor.
Well, I know
no problem
bourbon
getting that
wise,
group to
they had
train.
Angel's Envy, they had Woodford's Reserve, they had
Yep.
Buffalo Trace, they had a nice bourbon selection. I didn't even peek at all the other stuff, but it looked like it was definitely the nicest open bar I have ever been at any PCA function in the last 30 years. I can say that without any doubt whatsoever.
And there was lots of bars to go around. I mean, we were in a line, but we weren't in a line for more than six minutes, maybe 6-7 minutes. So
And the other thing too is none of the bar staff were grubbing for tips. I
no,
almost
they
had
were
to
very
force the
very
tips
nice about
on
it.
them. Like they didn't even have tip jars out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
Vegas
thought
is
that was
very
They did
generous.
it in that sort of southern Norland charming way. You know, you want a double? Okay, well, I'll just
Yeah.
push this forward. You want a double? We can get you with a double. You know,
Yeah.
The ambiance seemed good, right? The setting of the park, that seemed like it worked well from what I heard.
The
too.
weather was perfect, right?
Yep.
Smoking outside is great. I mean, there was ample seating. I mean, there wasn't enough seating
Yeah,
for
that's what I
everyone
heard
to sit
too.
simultaneously, but there was probably more seating than I think I've ever remembered before. And it was a good mix of sofas and club chairs and 4 tops and then high boy cocktail tables. They did a really, I gotta give those people credit. They did a really nice job setting it up. And they put up these giant aerial balloons so you could tell where the cigar stations were from anywhere in the park. You knew where you needed to go to. So that was nice too. They did a really good job, and the band was good. It was a good event. It really was. It was
That's good.
separate of being, look, I'm the benefactor of it as a sponsor, but the reality is we don't do anything. We just kind of show up with the number of cigars we're supposed to and do our thing. So really all the work is done by the PCA setting it up and then the local convention, whoever they contract out to do it, because I know it was like a separate event planner company that I think handled that. So, and they were good. They were professional. They kept us. And every little request, I had very little requests. I asked for a case of water for my people and enough chairs that they could sit down, and all those things were there. So
Nice. All right. So we finally get over to the convention day.
No, I did want to add something.
Oh, go ahead.
The PCA had smoking at Manning's, which had Rocky Patel and a few other people, and they had a tremendously well attended Women of PCA event at Cuban Creations. And it was awesome to see that even manufacturers who went to dinner, after dinner, they came to that. And that was really well executed. DuPont gifted something, one of those hanging wine two type things. And then somebody else gave a humidor. I think it was Quality Importers. I could be wrong about that. That was really well executed. And I think, obviously New Orleans, there's not a central place to smoke. But Cuban Creations in the Quarter, where you could smell all the pot and all the sugar in the air, or Manning's, which was closer to the hotel. Those are some really fun events, and they were very well attended on Friday and Saturday, and pretty well attended on Sunday. And the Women of PC event was really awesome. I thought that Kathleen Kennedy and Teresa from Georgetown Tobacco did a great job organizing that.
Nice. All right. So convention day, I'm going to turn it over to John to discuss early entry issues for the media. Go ahead, John.
I was very disappointed. I was very disappointed that I did not get refused at the door, because Josh himself was manning the door and made sure that everyone got a handshake and a hug and was ushered through, and it was as seamless could be. Very much appreciated the hands-on touch from Josh. I mean, Josh didn't need to be there himself, but
he promised,
did a great job.
He promised on our show, and he actually delivered on that.
Yeah.
Because we asked the question if someone was going to be at the door, and he says, "I will be personally at the door." And I think we also should say Josh was going around the whole convention floor, making sure, just checking on everyone and making sure the experience was good. And I think that was a great sign to see him do that as well. And I really liked that. I saw that on multiple places, him doing that over the 3 days.
Yeah. The only problem is, I think Josh probably needs to set up a text rotation for the Saturday morning, maybe around 8:00, and just text some of the exhibitors and remind them that the show floor is open at 9. And so it'd be a good idea to be, on the floor, ready to go, and have your booth ready to go before 9:00, because there's people with cameras who are going to be walking the floor at 9. So just as a, early warning.
Yeah, we actually mitigated a little of that, because that's where we did use some appointments for some of that.
It's easy for you to say, but that's hard on the teams. I mean, come on. It's like, because look, we show up at the booth about an hour before the show actually opens. And really, to ask your people to show up now 2 hours ahead so you guys can get an extra 45 minutes of filming. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. I just
like I said, the ones we had were arranged, and there were a couple companies that insisted we come during.
I think it's different. If you have an arranged meeting, then obviously they should be there for it.
I know, like LaFleur and Drew Estate, we use the media hours for those.
But I think to say all exhibitors should be ready to go a full hour before the trade show is an unrealistic expectation.
No, I don't expect that. I'm just wrestling Jimmy's. That's just that's who I am. Stirring the pot.
Yeah. That's what we do.
But I will say it is probably a good idea to run a vacuum over the carpet, prior to 9 a.m. Just, if you're not going to be there, that's okay. But run a vacuum over the carpet. That's all I ask.
All right. So we get into the convention floor. So I guess this is more for Coop, Jay, Jiunn, John. Thoughts on the layout of the floor plan and things like that once you got in there and kind of saw how things were stacked up.
The big improvement was the signs that were above now. Again, we're back this year. Where you could identify the aisle, as opposed to looking at the floor. I think that was a big plus. So it was very easy for us to find booths. We knew about the long convention hall. A lot of us remembered that from 2015. So that wasn't a terrible surprise. We were able to plan out the first 2 days. We did a good job at staying in one area of the floor. The last day we were going back and forth, and that's just the nature of it. But I thought it was very well laid out. It seemed like they used the space really well this year, and I didn't like. I heard some people saying some of the boutique companies were complaining about their booth locations last year. Honestly, I didn't think anyone had a terrible booth location. If you're at the end, you're at the end. That's just you know what you're getting into with that ahead of time. But for the most part, I didn't really see a lot of dead areas of the floor, except maybe the last
So,
day.
correct me if I'm wrong, but at the right, if you're walking straight in to the right end, there were a lot of big exhibitors on the right end of the show. It was more
Yeah.
the left end of the show where it started to get a little bit thinner, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
This is
some of the smaller.
this year, 2015 was our first trade show in New Orleans, so I wanted to go see where my old booth was when we first exhibited. And where my booth was all the way to the left by another 100 yards that didn't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the show wasn't as stretched out as it was the first time we were there in 2015.
No.
Well, it's because they had the non-cigar companies in there, I think, in 15 too. So I think
You're right.
that's when they still had hookah and stuff in there back then.
It was also nice to have I think there were two screen map directories
Yes.
within
The
like the
maps were
middle strip.
Yeah, they were easy to find those. When we couldn't find something,
Piece of
we,
cake.
we were able to identify where those were. That was
And there's
very
an
well
app.
done as
You
well.
you can always download the app. No one wants to download the app.
Yes,
The
yeah, I
app is
downloaded the
available.
app. I never used it once because I was able to just use those little
No,
directory
Right,
things on the
right.
floor.
it's easy
I
to
didn't even
self-serve when
download,
you're there.
apps for me. It's kind of a challenge. So
I will give the
Yeah.
PCA credit. They did a much better job with the layout because I remember when we were there in 2015 what a problem the columns were. They were
yeah,
so loose. And they did a very good job limiting the impact of the columns because there are a lot of columns in that long, skinny convention center that you got to work around. I don't know because I remember in 2015 there were some big columns in the middle of some pretty big booths. So
Yeah,
they did a good job working around the columns as much as they could.
Yeah,
I
you
was
could
impressed with that too.
Yeah, you could definitely tell the exhibitors who had learned from the 2015 in terms of their booth layout. There's a lot more open concept booths, which I think lends itself a lot better to the New Orleans trade show versus Vegas, where you had a little bit more partitioning with walls. And the problem with a convention center layout like that is if you have walls, it's very easy to walk past the booth entirely and realize, oh, I have to walk past the booth, make a left, and come back the other side to get in. And I would say at least half the booths were designed in a way that you could come into the booth at any of the four corners
I
and the
wonder how much of
sides.
that had to do with exhibitors leaving their big walled booths still in storage in Vegas and not
Yeah,
choosing to ship it to New Orleans, right?
yeah.
yeah, 100%.
So that may have been part of the reason why.
Yep.
But most of the big booths
I'm
were in the front. Yeah, most of the big booths were in the front. Now I'm thinking about it.
and I think John and
Where
Aaron, you guys
were
are
you
saying
located, Mike? I didn't get out of my booth. Where were you at?
I'm sorry, I was just texting Aaron Nielsen to text Guy Fieri to.
Tell them I'm available
He's
for interviews.
a butthurt.
tell
Yeah,
him
go
to get
ahead,
on
feel
right
free.
now.
I was behind Jake Wyatt's wall, all the way like kind
That's true.
of back mid left.
Yeah.
Jake White has a wall?
Yeah, he had a wall.
Big
There were
wall.
Really?
a lot of ones that had walls. Like
It's like Hadrian's wall back there.
the aisles were a little funky once you got past that big long middle aisle. Everybody
I
on the
think it was
back
trying to
half.
work around the columns. I think that's
Yeah.
probably why the aisles
Yeah,
are
so
funny.
what would happen is you'd have like 2 or 3 booths, but they had like big back walls, and there was like 2 or 3 booths that were behind them that were like you didn't know that they were there unless you actually like went down there and looked around to see what was going on. And you guys were kind of
Yeah.
like almost like faced out the other way, kind of.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I will say this. I think that the majority of the traffic was in that front right kind of pocket. As you kind of gravitated more and more left, it became a little bit more and more desolate. For me personally, I didn't mind being behind the wall of Jake Wyatt because all the tire kickers kind of missed you, right? You got a couple of people, you got the couple of sample braggers, but they were few and far between. So we just had our appointments that covered the majority of us as far as being occupied, and then the occasional straggler walking to and from the bathroom. So I did get to see Anthony Mackie twice, which was nice. No photo, unfortunately. But
You
I had
had
to
to
tell
ask
him
for one.
no. He kept
You
asking.
ask for one.
I don't do photos.
Jiunn, what were you going to say?
Um, I remember some comments saying, "Hey, the trade show in New Orleans is a lot bigger footprint than Vegas." I didn't feel that at all, and as compared to 6 years ago, I'm much fatter now, and I should have been more taxed walking around, but I didn't. I thought I was pretty well spaced out in general.
I think some of
I
the
think,
larger booths have trimmed down a little bit
Yeah.
over the last few years. So I think even some of the
Mm,
massive booths aren't as massive as they used to be. Um, so I think
yeah,
yeah,
that helps a lot. And then I also think the fact that the front to the back, because it is so skinny, you feel like you're kind of going through it a little quicker, even though it's really wide left to right. It's not as big a square as you have in other convention centers where it's a long way. I mean, it's a long way from corner to corner, but it feels like you get to see more as you're traveling. I don't know why. I just
no. I do wish it was this is gonna sound like just gonna sound like kind of a fucking cigar smoker argue, but it was pretty smoky in there. They should have did something for the ventilation.
Well,
At
you
least
didn't see
open up the
those
back
three
doors, get
rabbit
the
airs they had
fans.
set up? I thought those were
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah. They don't do anything when you're by yourself, so I don't know. I didn't expect them to do anything when you're in a room full of people. So
Yeah.
But you are right. Complaining about smoke at a cigar convention, yeah, Jiunn, you should shut the fuck up.
You're like, you're such a bitch. Do you smoke cigars?
Your original thought was right. You should have gone with
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Delete that.
we'll cut that out on the replay.
The only challenge I saw, and this is more of a technicality of the layout, is that if your booth is at the front of the exhibition hall and you make the error of going out to use the washroom outside, you've got a bit of a walk. And I get that there's like one main entry hall, but I don't know, and I don't know what the solution is, but there needs
I
to be a
do.
solution for exhibitors
It's
who
called
are
Ada Gonzalez Saka. I make her
Yeah.
step at the door while I take a whiz, and then I'd bang on the
Right.
door. She'd let me back in.
right, exactly.
All right, let's talk a little bit about sales. I'm not asking for actual numbers, but I'm actually on that by people coming to the booth, actually placing orders, all those kinds of things. Mike already talked about Tire Kickers a little bit, and missing him where he was located. So, how was sales this year compared to last year, previous years, things like that?
I'm the wrong guy to ask, aren't I? I mean,
No, mate, you're the right guy to ask.
we had a really good trade show. In the end, we ended up like about 35 points up by the end of the trade show. But we had a lot of new products. So that obviously really floats the number. We're on a little bit of a roll right now, and when you're on a roll, it's easy. I talked to some of my peers. Some of them didn't do as well this year as they had done the previous year, but I think that was reflective of the economy and the timing of the show. But nobody that I spoke with, and I didn't speak with all of the little guys because I don't really have any contact with them, but nobody was crying in their milk. Everybody I talked to, even if they said, "Yeah, we didn't quite do what we did last year, but it was still really good compared to what we expected coming into the show, seeing how Q1 was." Most of the people I talked to seemed pretty pleased with the amount of orders that they generated. And I also know that a lot of companies that are kind of in my tier class, they saw quite a few new exhibitors that they hadn't seen before. And that's something that's, getting harder and harder to do, to see attendees who haven't been to a trade show for a while. And part of it, I think, goes with what Mike was saying. Hey, I'm on the East Coast, so New Orleans is a bit more convenient for me. And the reality of the situation is there's way more retailers from about the middle of the country to the East Coast than they are from the middle of the country to the West Coast. So for the vast majority of operating retailers that could potentially attend the trade show, because out west you have a lot of distributor only purchasing, DTO type operators. Those aren't your typical PCA attendee type shops. There's a few, but not a lot of them. So I think that you actually ended up with you have a bigger pool. You have the same pool every year, but I think you have a more convenient pool to drive having the trade show on this side of the country versus the other side of the country. So that was my general vibe. So we had a good show. But who knows next year? Eventually it won't happen. We'll flatline, but this wasn't the year. But just the sheer number of new stuff we had just kind of it almost dictated that we were going to have a good show.
Right. How about you, Mike?
I mean, I know you don't like people talking positive about you, Steve, but you do a lot of things right as far as strategy and purchasing and the way that things are kind of designed. And for me, I kind of look at what you do and I look to try and put my own spin on it and kind of emulate it to some degree. And I think because of that and because of the product, this was our best core line sale show that we've had to date.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah. And, I mean, our numbers are nowhere incomparable to yours, but it was absolutely fantastic for us. And it just felt more controlled. It just felt more at ease. It was easier for the retailers to buy. It was easier to have the interactions with the retailers, maybe because we just have a little bit more time under our belt at this point. But in general, the entire experience was really positive. I would much preferably stay on the East Coast than go back to the West Coast. In that same fashion, I think that a lot of retailers, new accounts as well, it was easier for them to make this trip. And I got no complaints. I thought it was fantastic.
I mean, one of the things that we did was even though we had so much new, our releases are staggered throughout the year. So we gave all the retailers a map of when these things they can expect them to be delivered, which I think it made it a little easier for them to buy. Because if they thought we were going to dump all of this in their lap in the next 45, 60 days, I think it would have tremendously cut down on the amount of orders we took. So I think even though we were showing so much, the fact that we had a roadmap, look, I'm going to be off by 30 days always. Because if I said it's coming in September, I'm hoping it shows up in October. I mean, we're striving for September, obviously, but having all of that and those new products scheduled with a pre-described drop anticipated month, I think it made it easier for the retailers to get on board with all of these different things we're offering them. Because I think if they felt like, oh my God, Dunbarton's going to drop all this stuff off of my doorstep right now, it would have been disastrous for us. I don't think we would have gotten the orders we got.
Right. And that's exactly what we did too. I totally agree with it. We did it last year with you when we did our buy. I'm like, man, this is just so much more palatable when you kind of look at things. So when we were talking about our LEs, here's what we're looking for from you as a retailer as far as core is concerned. And here's
All
going to
right.
be your access points to these LEs at specific dates and time throughout the course of the year. Not only do you have that ability to kind of to set that up so it's not extremely expensive for the retailer on one big swoop, it also gives you the opportunity to follow up at those particular times and make sure that they're covered on all avenues. Hey,
Well,
this is coming.
you're right. That's the other thing it provides us. So, like whenever we ship Dunbarton's 10th Jubilee, that's a reason for my team to be on the phone. And oh, I also need two of this and three of those and one of these and one of those. And oh, you know what? Give me a couple more of those. So having those drops scheduled out like that gives us all these little extra touches to just do small fillers because the retailer is going to want to, like for us. I think you have to buy, I don't know, Cindy will know this better than me, but I think if you buy 1.5K, I think that gets you into the 3% shipping number. So the shipping number is really painful below. I'm always amazed by the retailers that buy stuff from us every 2 weeks and they buy like $600 and then $800. It's like, dude, you're spending way too much on shipping. Where if you hit a 1.5 number, that gets you to the maximum amount of shipping as a percentage across the board. So almost always the retailers will, even if they only ordered whatever, 8 bundles of Umbagog Bronzeback Robustos. When the time comes, they're probably going to add a little more because they know how much they're going to save on shipping. So they're much more likely to do the backfilling of their stock. So we try to think in the way that our buyers are going to buy. Now, this doesn't affect, the Neptunes and the CIs and the, Smoke-ins and the Coronas of the world. They're different. But when you think about the brick and mortar operator, he's got a real cash flow juggle.
Right.
So you try to kind of do that. And the other thing that we did this year is to try to prevent the problem that we had with the year of the Duque we just took interest orders on that. In other words, we didn't say what it was going to be, but we said, listen, we're going to offer this to sell to you in July. Okay. But if you're interested, if you give us an idea, I can plan production wise that if I need to adjust it higher, I can do so now and get a little ahead of the curve. So we had like we had 7 things we released, but then we had 3 other things that we basically said, are you interested in this? And if so, how many are you potentially interested in? The holiday, the Total Lost DS archive release, and then the next year of. And they weren't cash commitments. They weren't even obligations to take the box. It was just yeah, I'm interested in that. How many do you think you'll be interested in? I think this many I would probably be interested in, but without any promise that they actually would. But it still lets me plan better. And even those things are scheduled to November, January, February drops, right? So they'll even know about those, well in advance before they'll happen.
Yeah, that's brilliant because it covers you into PCA going into the following year.
And it
You know,
also helps shore up the ugly Q1 that we all endure.
right.
So
100.
by having stuff that drops in, that end of November, then January, then February that are easy, you want them to be easy turn items for the retailer where they're not sitting on them. You want it to be like a Salino Red, a year of the whatever, where they can count on, oh, I'm going to probably flip this into cash really, really quick.
Right.
So trying to make sure that they get those really easy flips also helps tremendously. Just kind of, look, you're always trying to make it as we don't do big discounts. So we always try to make it as easy as possible for the retailer to give us a steady flow of money rather than a lot of money in one lump sum. Because at the end of the year, the dollars are the dollars. So the whole way we do the trade show is a little bit different than the traditional, hey, if you buy so much, we're going to give you 20 points off. We'll give you 30 points off. If you buy 5 of these, we give you 2 free. We don't do that the way we operate. And I'm not saying it's the best way to operate. It's just how we operate, and it tends to work well. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see growth because I think the product's getting more brand recognition, but I also think we try to facilitate understanding how the retailers have to purchase too.
Right. And it's way easier on the retailer with that process.
So did you
Aaron,
guys?
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
I want to know what the experience was from a retailer perspective, Jay.
Yeah, before we get there, I just had one follow-up question for these guys. So did you get to maybe see some retailers that you normally wouldn't see in Vegas because of where the show was, that maybe some that you hadn't come to a trade show to meet with you that came this year?
I personally didn't because I'm pretty much media only
Yeah.
during most of the trade show. But my people said that they did,
Okay.
that they saw some people that they hadn't seen in quite a while.
Okay.
And they were people, some that used to be customers that are now customers again, people that are customers that have never come to the trade show or haven't been coming recently.
Mhm.
So there was definitely an increase of those. And there were a lot of people that were missing that we normally would see.
Yeah.
Obviously, some of the West Coast people.
Yeah.
And look, with it Saturday being Passover, we lost a big block of people that would attend the trade show, but Passover is an immovable holiday for a lot of people and their families. So we probably had 20 or 22 accounts that are good, solid accounts, and they still bought from us, but they weren't there physically in person because of Passover.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, similar fashion for us. We had accounts that we didn't see in Vegas that did come and attend and came to the booth this year. And we had more new accounts, more in that Southeast region
Yeah.
that we've never
We had
met
a lot
before.
more Florida accounts than I ever remember attending the trade show.
Right. And and Florida's a big account, is a
Yeah.
big state for cigars.
Big cigar state.
So providing that opportunity for Florida retailers is huge. Is huge.
All right. So Jay, yeah, from the retailer side, I know we talked a little bit about when we were talking about tariffs, about how it kind of maybe changed your buying strategy. But in regards to you going in, meeting with brands, placing orders, things like that, how did you view the show this year?
The booth seemed most of the booths seemed pretty busy. Some of the newer brands we talked to, I guess they were having troubles with credit cards. We actually had 2 booths that said that we need to use Venmo or Zelle, which that I hadn't heard that before. But I think in general, most of the booths we were at were pretty busy, and they seemed to appreciative of the orders. And
That's crazy to me, Jay. The VIG on Venmo and Zelle are, unless something has dramatically changed in the last few years. I mean, the VIG
yeah,
on those processors are pretty high.
I mean, I had one company I talked with today who was a newer company, and they basically said, "Well, we'll give you 5% off if you pay ahead of time." And I just said, "Look, no offense, I don't know who the heck you guys are." I said, "Send me the product and then I'll pay you. I don't need the 5%," because it just felt weird. Um, but that was something that some companies have got cut off. You know, they just haven't done their due diligence. Maybe they're working through Square or something like that. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I mean, I thought it was very positive. There were a couple booths that I didn't schedule appointments at where I had to come back a second or a third time, and that was good to see, including some companies that were there for the first time that we've carried for a while. So it seemed like it was robust sales. Um, and what surprised me the most, and I know we're not quite to this point, is that the foot traffic seemed better on the last day. I mean, obviously it wasn't as robust as the first 2 days, but it seemed better than the last day last year.
Yeah, it felt that way to me too. Hey, let me ask you this. So how was the general discounting level, the deals? Were they typical? Were they more aggressive than normal? Were they less than normal? How did you feel about the deal structure? Because I don't get any exposure to that at all.
Well, I think for the big people, I mean, Drew Estate's Drew Estate. You know, you need to use integral calculus to figure out the exact discount level. And you know, Fuente's Fuente. You know you've got these 10 new items, but you can only order three of them, and all that. But I would say in general, the discounting is less, which that's to me as a retailer, I like that. I don't ever ask what the deal is. I go in to order what I want, and then I say, okay, uh, am I close to a deal? And a
Right.
lot of people didn't have deals, or if they did have deals, I mean, it was 5% or 10%. Um, I generally don't want to do business with companies that are discounting their cigars 20, 30, 40%. There's a reason why they're discounting them like that. So we don't carry a lot of brands like that. Um, they're just like, hey, you know, your benefit is you get free shipping. So I didn't really see, to me, discounting seems to be more under control, at least for the companies I'm ordering from. You know, I was surprised when I went to Altadas, who, by the way, I thought they had a very good booth this year and some very good products. I was surprised that they were auctioning off a Vespa, and when I went to them on was it Sunday afternoon, they'd already auctioned it off, and I'm like, well, what's the benefit? So I got some free ashtrays out of it because I'm like, come on, I mean, you've already pulled the ticket in a day and a half in the show. Um, but that being said, I thought Altadis had the best booth that they had had in years, and they took really good care of their people. I
Agree.
didn't go into Forged, but I guess I missed the Room 101 humidor, which supposedly that was the darling of the show.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he did a
Um,
great job with that. Yeah.
Davidoff was so crazy. I had to walk around the booth to get inside to see my rep, and they had really good cookies in the Davidoff booth. But Davidoff probably needs a bigger booth.
Yeah.
So it seemed like everybody was pretty robust. But like I said, the discounts were not crazy, at least from my perspective. Mike, did you think discounting was crazy?
No, I mean, I didn't honestly get to cover a lot of sales. My brother did poke around to cover Fuente. He covered the Drew Estate stuff, you know, your bigger things in general, but he had not approached me saying, "Hey, there's a discount for this." And usually he would, consult me to make a decision as far as, "Hey, look, if we hit this tier, we get this specific discount. Is this something that we should consider?" He never mentioned any of that to me. So he didn't get to do any real scouting either, but it's not like HVC was approaching anybody, or you know what I mean, just using him as an example, or some of your mid-level brands that you would maybe anticipate something that would incentivize a bigger purchase. So he didn't really track all that. What the one thing that was kind of interesting to me was there was that, forgive me, there was like a Chinese
Chamali.
brand that people were talking about, and
Yeah.
Palmer went over there to go get a price sheet, and I said, okay, well, where I smoked one of the cigars. I thought it was pretty good. I said, okay, well, we can open them up if you want to go open them up. And he went over there and he came back. He goes, no, they just want to take down your information. I'm like, okay. So you spent the money on the booth, but you're not writing orders.
Well,
It
yeah,
might
Cigar Ambassador, is that what you're talking about?
No, the
Lily Wax Company?
chamali.
Oh, what another interesting one I had is, and this is my fault because I'm on the PCA trade show committee. I didn't realize that Mayflower had a booth. So four emails and a couple of phone calls later, I got a standard response that they're not doing retail accounts yet. I'm like, well, you're at Smoke Inn and you won the best medium sized booth. So I got some samples from them today with someone's card. So I guess my request for a price list hasn't happened yet. But I think it's their first trade show and they're just figuring that stuff out. But I did smoke a Lily Wang cigar that I think her son blended. It was at the Women of PCA. And my wife, who attended her first show, she insisted me to go to the booth. And she went to the booth, and it was Monday. And they're like, hey, we're out of samples. So they gave her a lighter. It was like an $80 lighter. I'm like, okay, that's a deal. But I was pleasantly surprised with some of the newer booths like that, who had some pretty good cigars. There weren't too many. I mean, yeah, there's always bad cigars, but some of the newer companies had some pretty good offerings. That was refreshing to see.
So going back to something you said, Aaron, that brand is Chamoli, not Chamol.
Himali.
No,
Chamali.
yeah, it's a Chinese company. So it's CHI and then
I find that really
MOLLY.
weird because Chamol is the Nicaraguan like Pica de Gallo.
Mm-hmm.
They're making the
Called-
cigars in
That's
Nicaragua.
what they
though.
call Pica de Gallo in Nicaragua is Chamol. It's
Mhm.
spelled the same way, CHIMOLE, but it's pronounced Chamol. So I thought that that's what they were, because I saw the name, so I assumed it was based on Nicaraguan Chamol is what I thought it
Right.
was. Okay. Interesting.
And it was
Chamol.
hard to get orange juice at some booths, but that all got resolved.
Orange juice. Okay.
It was an F&B person, but yeah, I mean, I thought it was good to see a lot of new companies there.
Don't you have
And
to
like I
think
said-
that part of it becomes easier? Like we use Calendly to do our scheduling now. I think a lot of companies use Calendly. I think it makes it easier. The only thing that's confusing about Calendly is the time conversion.
Yep.
Always confuses people. I wish you lock it in for the time zone you're in, but whatever time zone someone gets their confirmation, it adjusts for the time zone they're currently in. So it puts it in the calendar at the wrong time, and then when you fly in, it then adjusts it to the right time. I wish it was, but I think everybody's gotten better at scheduling appointments,
Mm.
right? And I think a lot of it, I think most people are using Calendly at this point because it's so convenient to use and relatively easy and relatively inexpensive too to do their appointment book.
Even a small company like we had an appointment at 3:00 on Monday, which is I think the floor closed at 4 with Enrique Cejas, and I didn't see as many people wrap up their booths early, and we had a great appointment. And it seemed like, obviously, there were a few people that shut down their booths early, but not like you saw in 2021 or 2022, not as many. So that was refreshing to see. I think having a closing time of 4:00 was good. Opening time at 8:00. The board should have listened to Lisa.
Yeah.
We should have listened to Lisa Cox, and we should have opened later.
Yeah,
But
there's
that
no
being
reason
said,
to open early on the third day at all.
I agree.
Just keep it at the same time as the other days. It also confuses people. Trying to get them to have a different schedule. Closing an hour early is easier, but coming in an hour earlier on the third day, that's a little rough.
2 hours early.
Was it 2 hours early?
Yeah, because it was 10 to 6, and then the last day it was 8 to 4.
Yeah,
I got a lot of
that was
work done
brutal.
between 8 and 10 because a lot of people weren't on the trade show floor. But yeah, I think it would have made more sense to open at 10:00. We should have listened to Lisa Cox, and the board in its wisdom did not listen to Lisa. So Lisa was doing physical counts of people walking on the floor so she could show us that we were wrong. And she's probably going to be right.
Yeah, she is right. No, it's tough. It's also tough because I have to have my team there at 7:15 to open at 8. And normally we have them there an hour before, and I'm like, okay, well, let's go 45 minutes before because we know there's not going to be barely anybody when the show first opens.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's like it's okay to have less hours on that third day.
Yeah.
I would have been happy to open at 10 again on the third day personally.
All right. So another
Yeah.
question for you, Jay. In regards to the companies that you were visiting and purchasing product from, what did you feel like the availability of the product was going to be like for what you were ordering? Do you think the timing of when these new cigars that they're offering, when they're going to be rolling into your store is a good time frame, or they're maybe floating out too far away from the show, or how did you think they stacked up?
Well, given the pallets that I got, and I don't usually get pallets on Thursday and then today, a lot of companies, it's kind of shocking my cash flow, are shipping quite a lot. And I know that like JC Newman, and obviously they're a bigger company. Some of the companies, they probably did the bonded warehouse thing that Steve was talking about. They said, look, we have enough inventory to last us to May 1st or May 31st. A lot of the big boys told me that, but I was surprised how many companies shipped. There were some cigars. I think my Deadwood cigars got back 2 days before I did.
Hmm.
So it looked like the big companies, especially, but even the medium sized companies. I got my Espinosa order today, and I got my Davidoff order today. I got my Fuente order today, and tomorrow I've got orders all day. In fact, in order to get home for the podcast today, there's things that we put in the system that we haven't put on the shelf because otherwise I would be at work right now. So it seems to me, now if I could just convince Dunbarton to send me my Year of the Duque, which I know that they're
I'm
working
just
hard on
looking
that.
that up right now. I think they shipped out today, actually.
Well, usually they call me and ask me for my credit card, but maybe they hit me already. I still don't know how you do that, Steve. That is probably the best white glove service in the industry. I almost always get a call and then get a credit card confirmation. Then I get invoices. And I'm actually hoping that you don't have everything because I don't want to pay for you're the Duque when I pay for everything else I ordered. But no, but really, I think the answer to your question, Aaron, to be more precise, was I think that companies were very prepared to ship versus last year where you had 9 months between shows. But part of this may have been the tariffs as well. But companies appeared ready to ship a lot more than usual.
I also think Q1 wasn't a good, so I think they were hoping to bang those cigars out as
Yeah.
much as they possibly could. I think for a lot of companies this was because you used to have the benefit for the big companies, didn't help us, but you don't have that because normally you would get a desperation purchase at TAA, right? The way the old TAA worked. Normally the big companies, because Q1 always sucks. It's just universally true in our business. So normally the big companies would offer a very, very fat discount at TAA. And there would be a lot of like big legacy kind of retailers that would purchase a lot of their Altadis, their STG, and their whatnot at that TAA deal. And you don't have that anymore. That's kind of gone away. And then you didn't get any benefit out of TPE because it was really too close.
Yeah.
So getting that hit from TP at in the February month kind of has gone away by where the trade show is now scheduled. So it doesn't surprise me that companies were ready. And I also know that I think everybody's getting more efficient, right? Like 3 years ago, we wrote orders on a piece of paper. Now we have internet access in the booth. They're actually putting the orders in the system as people are giving us the orders. The nice part about that is we can give somebody a real total as to what their order actually cost them when they ask us, as we're doing it. But now the numbers are getting put into the system. And I think as everything gets cheaper to do these things, I think you're going to find more and more companies being able to process orders like while they're actually attending the trade show. I think that's a lot different where honestly, 10 years ago, that was really just pretty much the purview of the largest of the large companies to be able to process an order while the trade show was actually happening.
Did you have Wi-Fi in your booth? Because I know that in Vegas a couple years ago it was really expensive. And was that provided free or how did that work?
No, it's expensive, but it was about half the cost of what it is in Vegas. Yeah, we had Wi-Fi with 10 seats. So we had Wi-Fi access for 10. And look, I just know for us, we miss less that way. Because you'd write stuff on a piece of paper, then that piece of paper would get lost, and then we'd miss somebody's order. This is easier. Everybody's actually putting it into the system. They're actually on the system as you're doing your order. If somebody has a question, what they have back order, it's easy to look up. It's very easy to tell them how much they spent with us in the last, 12 months, 3 months, whatever they want to ask the question. So having that access makes a big difference. Yeah. I think we pay about $1,000 a day and I could be a little wrong on this, but I think it's pretty close to that. About $100 a day per seat. So it was about $3,000 to have Wi-Fi access. That's why I was surprised when I saw Half Wheel talk about how much they spent on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
They obviously have a much better bandwidth than we have, right?
Yeah, I
Than
would
what
think
we,
so.
of course, we're just crunching numbers between a system and a database, right? We're not
Uploading
uploading videos
photos.
or whatever
Yeah.
the heck they're also doing. So we don't need that type of throughput.
And Steve, following back up on your question about the first quarter, I can't speak for anyone else, but I live in Dallas, where we generally get a week in February where it's in the 20s. We had 2 weeks that were very cold in February, and a week in January is very cold, which is unusual for Dallas. So I'm assuming the rest of the country was
Yeah,
just as cold or colder,
it
and that
was.
could have
It
affected
was a
sales
rough
too.
winter for a lot of people. It was a tough look. It's not just the normal typical weather problems you have in Q1, but coming up the election, I don't know about you guys. I look at my stock portfolio and it's just blood in the streets. And so that doesn't make anyone feel warm and fuzzy when you see whatever your retirement accounts are doing, right? It unnerves everybody, even if you're not going to use it for so many years in the future. I think it's and then of course, it's just I think it's a little tumultuous right now. And I think we can all universally agree that business is better when things are a little bit more status quo and a little bit more even keeled for everybody. So, like I said, we had to have a very specific strategy to deal with it because I also know that election years are bad. Election years are always rough. Consumer confidence always goes down, the 4 or 5 months before any election. It's just human nature. It's the way it works. So you're coming out of the election year into this. Yeah, I think business strategy wise, you need to plan taking those things into consideration. It's not just how great my cigars are. You also have to think about how are they going to be bought, how are they going to turn. You got to think in those terms. And I think it makes a big difference in planning, as to how things can be. Because, you know, again, we all retailers want the same thing. They want products that are easy to flip and easy to turn. Stuff that drops in the shop and goes out pretty quick. And the more of that kind of stuff you have, it makes their lives a lot easier.
All right, let's talk about some new brands. This might be more for Jay and the media guys, but any new brands that you came across at the show that were kind of impressive to you?
We brought in 3 new brands. We brought in Stoic
Hmm.
that Mr. Kellner makes. Um, and that impressed us so much, we actually reached out to him, and we're getting samples tomorrow of the Avowed lines that he's making for small batch. Um, and they were very easy to work with. Um, and I really like their cigars. We also reached out to Domain. I've been in conversations with them for about a year. I had a lot of retailers tell me how well the products were doing. And then I think we've decided to bring in this Adrian Magnus brand, which I actually went and watched an old review that you and John did. Um, I didn't like their 12 and 15 years that much, but their 5, 7, and 8 years were really good. The less expensive cigars, and I was pretty impressed with their packaging. It's not often that you're smoking a $13 cigar and you assume they're going to tell you it's a $30 cigar. And I'm like, so they had some impressive products. Um, then a new company that we started working with last year, Didier, they actually had a pretty nice booth. Definitely AI generated. They were super friendly to us. Um, I think we ordered 20 boxes last year and they treated us like, we were a top tier Opus account. It was pretty impressive. And then there were a number of other brands that we looked at that were pretty impressive. Um, so, I mean, like I said, the Cigar Ambassador, I thought that was a good cigar. So, the competition continues to build. So there were a number of really good brands. We only had one brand that we were considering maybe bringing back in, but by the last day of the show, they like literally threw a bundle at my brother and said, "It's been a shitty show. Everybody here just wants to get samples." And it was sort of like, "Okay, you're having a rough show. I'll forgive you." But other than that, and I won't mention the company. But it seemed like there were some good brands there. There were a couple brands that in other years I may have bought their product, but there was some stiff competition from some of the new brands, and that's good to see.
Yeah. All right, Coop. Any new brands you came across at this show?
Yeah, there were a few. The one I'll start off with is a company called Casa Molina. They're a Louisiana-based cigar company, and they had some pretty impressive cigars. I've actually smoked a couple of them, and I actually thought they were pretty good. They're making some stuff with Hostos, but the big thing that they're going to be doing is they have a Perique farming operation in Louisiana, so you're going to start to see some blends that they're going to start to incorporate that into. So I think that was something where we found them the last day of the show in Casa Molina. It's definitely one I wish we would have had more time to kind of spend in that booth for sure. I think this company is not really new to a lot of folks, but what was new to the show was Lure Cigars. That's Lou Cross's line. He makes some pretty bold smokes. It's that whole fishing theme, but he's making cigars with another company, Valkyrie Cigars, and that's he's a retailer out of Tallahassee that's starting to make cigars. He makes the Lure cigars, but Ben's been very high on that brand for a long time, so he was very familiar with it. But it was their first trade show that they were at, so I'd put them in there. And again, Domain was someone I knew already, so they're not really a new company for me. But Domain's been pretty impressive as well. I think they're doing some very good things. But though I didn't. Chamali was really an Aaron Nielsen deal. He found Chamali. I didn't get a chance to visit with them. And I have not smoked the cigar yet, other than the guys who have smoked the cigar on our team were very impressed with that Chamali cigar. So it's something we're going to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the company that we heard the most about, just from random people like telling us the same thing. So it seemed like that people that had been smoking it were having
Yeah,
similar
Nielsen
experiences.
found them on day one, like very early too. So I don't know if he was the first. I'm not saying he was the first, but he found them, and normally that's what we do is we have him kind of seek out a company that we didn't have on the radar, and he was really high on that. And then when the guys, my squad didn't go to that booth. It was the Bear Ben squad that went there. They were pretty impressed as well.
Hmm. Anything from you, John, that you ran up against that was interesting from a new brand point of view?
I'll echo Stoic. Cigars are good. I think more importantly, they came in prepared for the trade show. They exhibited like they'd been there before, which is not often the case with a new brand. Usually you'll see a 10 by 10 with a table is kind of the typical, and they did not. They obviously went all in, and I think that represented them quite well. One of the brands that had a lot of hustle because they chased us down on the floor, and credit to them, was Hermanos de Armas. It's a veteran-owned company. And I have mad respect for a guy in a booth who's willing to chase somebody down to bring them into the booth to show off the product. So definitely props there. And then certainly echo the sentiment around Chamali. Generated a lot of buzz despite the fact that they're very quiet in the booth.
Can you give us a little snippet of your discussion with them?
Yeah, I think it just need to take some drama courses, because I think we were standing close enough that I could have booped him on the nose, and the presentation went.
John, these new companies, right? If they would actually take the effort to kind of reach out to us ahead of time, right, we would have them on the radar instead of them having to grab us on the floor. And we tell them that all the time because it's really hard for us when we're on a schedule to kind of now suddenly deviate from that schedule. So and I will tell you that the companies that have done the reach out had better traffic at booths in general, because there's a reason to go to. I always say there's a reason to go to the booths besides telling me what your booth number is.
Yeah, and I don't understand that. Obviously I'm not an exhibitor, but I'm a former retailer, so I think I wear a few hats, and I don't understand when the PCA makes the media, Rolodex for those who are older available for everyone to reach out well in advance of the trade show. Take advantage of that. I mean, the trade show is your opportunity to not only showcase the retailers, but to get the word out through media. And so you've got all the tools at your disposal. You definitely got to use those tools. And I don't think any of those three companies, at least, I mean, I certainly had a lot of emails, but I don't recall seeing an email from or connection from any of those three companies prior to the show.
Yeah, I really believe this Casa Molina company, if they had done a reach out and we had them on the radar, I think, and other media had them on the radar, people would have went to that booth. Same with Chamali. Yeah.
Jiunn?
All right. Any cigars that people smoked at the trade show that they thought were kind of standouts? I know smoking at the trade show is not always the best barometer, but if there's anything that kind of caught you by surprise, feel free to share.
I thought cigars tasted great at the show because it's not summertime Vegas where all cigars taste like shit. So
Yeah.
Marvin from who manages all the like our fields, I think they're Foodland in Oahu. He gave me an unbanded and he told me that it's Ed Reed's cigar that comes out of Placencia. I was really surprised how good it was. Usually, for the most part, anything that's celebrity backed is usually not that good of a cigar. That's within cigars and spirits industry, I would say. But I was really surprised by it. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah,
Aaron,
I
I know
liked,
you had.
oh,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, Aaron, you had one on day one that you were.
Yeah, I
impressed by?
smoked the Viva La Vida Connecticut, and it was pretty good.
Very good cigar. Very good cigar.
Yeah, it's not AJ like at all, which is probably why I liked it. But yeah, it's a good, nice cigar, nice Connecticut, and that's all I'm looking to do forward to reviewing it later on.
Sort of.
And of course, you have all the ones that I feel like with every trade show, it keeps me coming back to the well, right? All the limited editions that always comes up, right? Like Foundation, obviously, and then just limiteds in general. I'm always excited to try those. But like net new surprises are, aside from the Ed Reed, Stoic for sure. I thought that sample that we all had was great. But then again, you got to really like that like class like counter profile to really enjoy that. So
And Jubilee didn't suck.
Oh, you
That was
smoked
nice.
it?
Yeah.
You liked it?
Yeah, it didn't suck. It was good.
That's good to hear.
We're always worried about Ecuador and Sumatra.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, I
can't
didn't
speak
get
for
that
Seth.
sample, but
I didn't
the Fratanga was great. A cigar that I really had high expectations for, and it delivered, and I've smoked two samples, was the Preakness 150 by Lee Marsh and Stolen Thrones. Though he said his goal was something more medium, I think it's a little bit medium plus. But that cigar was surprised me. The new Romeo and Juliet 150th, I can't believe I'm going to say this about Alta cigar. It was a banger. That was a really good cigar. You could have charged me $50 for that cigar. Just don't tell Rafael I said that. That was a very, very good cigar. I think Steve would actually like that cigar.
It was
Where is
very
it
good.
being made, Jay?
Well, geez, they got everybody. They got
It's in the
somebody in the
DR.
Dominican.
It's not AJ.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
AJ's Sublime Tobacco, so are the Torrens, so is David Perez. There's also somebody in the Dominican
They're not
Sublime
going to end up
Tobacco.
in their construction constraint scenario that they would with some of Abdel's products.
Right.
Yeah,
This was a Tabacalera Garcia they're making it.
Yeah.
It's very. I had it a pro cigar, so it wasn't really a cigar. I'd already had that cigar ahead of time. I knew it was really good.
the new AJ collaboration, the Goat, was. I smoked that this morning. I was on a fresh palate. I was really impressed with it. So I tell you, New Orleans is different. I've actually had to humidify my cigars to get the humidity down. But it seemed like, with the exception of the usual suspects, that a lot of the show samples were ready. I've smoked 2 Rocky 30ths, and I think it will be a good cigar in 7 or 8 months. But I don't know why they would put a ban on that cigar. That cigar is not ready, but I think it's going to be really good.
Hey,
I had
Mike,
the same reaction,
what were
Jay,
you
with that.
launching new at the trade show? Did you have something new at the trade show, Mike?
Who, me?
Yeah, did you have something new?
I was showcasing the War Bear and the SBC, but I didn't have any samples really. I had some segundos on me that I gave out to a couple people to smoke, and the Viso Horny was out there as well, but similar in fashion, he didn't really have samples to smoke.
So you
Those
distribute Tyler cigars. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I handled distribution for him for this go round to
Okay.
help solidify him and really start positioning him to be something in the industry and take it more seriously. So that went extremely well. We sold out on all of those. Um, he's a
Starting with
great
San Andre.
Yeah, I thought your Mexican San Andreas was not to blow smoke over your ass, but I thought this Mexican San Andreas Powstanie was really good, Mike.
Thanks, man. I
I didn't
appreciate
smoke it,
Yeah,
but I heard a lot of people tell me how much they loved your San
Yeah,
Andreas.
you should smoke it.
And I,
yeah.
like I said, I didn't really stop by your booth. I stopped by to say hello for a second, but I heard like 10 people say how much they liked your San Andreas, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was
Yeah.
very well received. It came out a month or two prior to the show. So that's why I didn't really talk about it as it being brand new, so
You
but in
kidding me? I
general,
got a Toledo Red in my new count of 7, so I
I,
count everything.
Salida Red was really good.
It's
That was the
4 weeks
one I
old. It's
smoked.
new, for God's sakes. Come on.
I really like Salida Red. That was the first time I had it. Very good cigar. And I gotta say, Ben and I smoked the San Andreas Mike driving back from New Orleans, and it was even with a few weeks more age on it. Not that it was young, because it wasn't. It really was clicking. I mean, we were both very, very impressed with that. We're smoking that in the car too. Keep that in mind, which is not the best place sometimes. It was
Yeah,
really,
it
it was really,
doesn't taste like
yeah,
every other San Andre.
yeah. That
yeah,
was the one thing. It wasn't that cookie cutter San Andreas.
what do you
Yeah.
hope for, right? When you go
I
to
want
make
to double
something.
back to all the new companies because there were a lot of new companies there this year. It seemed to me, looking at the list,
Yeah.
a lot of names I didn't recognize. And Jay, you're probably one of the more adventurous retailers, and you brought in 3 brands, right? I know a
Yeah.
lot of the other customers, they brought in maybe 1 or 2 at best. I mean, do you really think there's enough space for all of those young companies to even get a fair shake? Because I just find retailers are a lot more gun shy about bringing in lesser known products that don't have some sort of, like, it's one thing you do domain because okay, you got Esteban Diesla, right? So that's a connection that comes from the past. You got, what I mean? It doesn't quite count the same way. I mean, do you I see? I
No,
just
I
wonder,
agree.
is there
I did
enough?
a
It's really tough to break in. I mean, Mike will tell you how hard it is, and he's known. I know how hard it's been for us, and I've been pretty well known. You know what I mean? It's not been a walk in the park. So, and I also noticed, and the other thing too, I'm curious about is that question. And the other thing is, I noticed that there were some people that I expected to be at the trade show that weren't there this year. I know Kurt decided not to exhibit
Right.
724.
Yeah.
I noticed Ian wasn't there with Dapper.
Right.
And these are just because these are 2 friends of mine. So that's why they're top of mind. But were there other kind of like no shows that you would have
Freud.
expected?
Yeah.
Freud wasn't there.
Freud, Don
Sam,
Dorteo,
Sam.
Song,
Wildfire, little cherry
Sam
Wildfire.
cigar. Yeah,
wasn't there,
he was
huh?
supposed to be there.
And
They were
Wildfire
supposed to
wasn't
be
there?
there. I thought they were on the list originally.
I got wildfire samples somehow. I don't know who gave them to my
Oh,
They
wife,
weren't on
but
the
hmm,
directory. I
yeah.
couldn't,
um,
we didn't see him around anywhere.
well, Steve, to answer your question, is I did a culling. I went through and I'm kind of a numbers guy. I stack ranked all 96 brands that I carry, which is an insane number of brands, and by profit margin. And the top 43 I'm going to keep. So there were a lot of other brands that I decided that we've been exiting them out of the humidor to make
Right.
space for the 3 new brands. Um, I had only planned on really doing 2. Um, but and there were a couple brands like HVC, which I love HVC cigars, but they just don't move in my humidor. And I just ordered 2 boxes for myself, which the
You can
shipping
say
would
that
be
about
crazy.
almost every brand, right? There are brands that, even good brands, that just don't work well for
There
all.
were a lot of good brands that we're having to say goodbye to, and that's tough. And then I guess technically you could say that we added a 4th brand because we basically relaunched Espinosa. Um, but yeah, we've been clearing space, and if the, with the exception of Stolen Thrones, which economically does not deserve to be in my humidor, I just I love the way Lee Marsh makes cigars. I love his passion, so he stays in the humidor. Although there's no economical reason for that, but we're basically cutting bait on about 40 brands, and we're just, as it goes out, it's done. And then there were some other brands that, we're sort of on the fence on, and we went light on them. But the answer to your question is, we've made room for those three brands, and people just have to understand it's not personal. And I think sometimes brand owners get very butthurt. But I've been doing this long enough that I'm just like, look, I like your cigars, but they're not turning. Not to embarrass Mike, I love Mike, and I think his Connecticut last year is fantastic. But I bought 8 boxes the show last year. I still have 5 boxes left. So that's why I didn't go to Mike's booth. It's not because I'm mad at Mike or don't think Mike has fantastic cigars. He does. But you just have to make economic decisions like that. And it's tough because somebody like Mike, who I admire and I look up to, you can't carry everything. And at the end of the day, you are running a business. I do have college tuition to pay. And my son, who was determined not to go to college, just got a 31 on the ACT, and he's a junior. So I guess he's going to college now. And I was kind of hoping I wouldn't have to pay for another college education. But those are things you weigh in. You just finally have to say economically, it's just not worth it.
But a lot of times too, Jay, sometimes things will look. I know that for us, we have your account was a perfect example. My cigars did particularly well in your store for quite a long time, and it's only been recently that the brand has started to pick up for you, where it's now something that's like, I think we're hitting your top 10 now.
Oh, yeah. You're right. We try
but I mean, it didn't for a long, long time.
Oh, 2 or 3 years,
right? So
maybe 4 years. We were pretty lean.
I think it takes a lot of. I think that's one of the things that, like, for a lot of small brand owners, they don't realize how long it takes to actually get a brand to even percolate, and how much grind there is in the front end. That's not measured in a year, 2, or even 3 years. It really takes 7, 8 years sometimes before you even start to begin getting any traction at all. And I think that's one of the things that for some of the smaller guys, I always wonder if they're in for the grind that's going to be necessary, because the grind is brutal. It really honestly is.
You have to do that pause. Like Mike's in that pause period. We didn't order anything new, but Mike still has like 10 facings on the shelf. It's not like he's gone. But people that we've had for 3, 4, 5 years were, okay, fine, your shelf space has to go away. Or like I had a very frank conversation with my good friend Oliver. Some of the United brands just weren't turning for us. Oh, and I should mention the new Gold Star may have been my favorite cigar at the show. And the original Gold Star didn't sell that well for us. But wow, I was really impressed with that. So like we had a conversation where I'm like, look, I'm going to have to take a pause on this brand and that brand. They're still going to be on the shelf, but we're not going to add to it. But there were other things we wanted to add. And that's something you didn't anticipate. I was not going to order the new Gold Star because the old Gold Star didn't do that well for us. But that cigar blew me away. I really like that cigar. So you have to make allowances for things like that too.
Well, what's your philosophy with that, Mike? I mean, you have a good size humidor, but you don't have a crazy humidor. You don't have like 3,000 facings. I mean, you have to be very selective with what you bring in and what you don't bring in, don't you?
Sure, 100%. And the funny part is that 15 years of being in the industry, now I at least have enough data where I can kind of scope and make what I think is the appropriate decision. The harsh reality is, you're right, 7 years is about the time when you start to see brands disappear. They start to fade away. And these brands don't just vanish, right? They slowly kind of bleed out. Year 5, year 6, year 7, and then they're gone. What happened to them?
Right.
We all know that there's good tobacco and then there's okay tobacco, right? And a lot of those brands, they're not that entrenched enough where they're getting really good tobacco. So they're already one step behind in a lot of comparisons. And then the next thing is, you can have okay tobacco, but you have to be able to sell it. And there has to be some belief behind the brand in itself for it to even track. So if you're not doing those two things properly, you're already going to find yourself on this downslope of this kind of trend. So it does make sense that if you can affiliate with a good factory or a trustworthy factory or some type of origin based that will help you off the jump, will you be able to sustain? So from a retailer's perspective, I wasn't really looking at anything new this year, not at all. And even I think from a bigger scope, from a macro scope, Jay's talking about all these brands, these bigger brands that are pushing their product in advance at a higher level. Maybe they're worried about tariffs, maybe they're not. I think what they are really worried about is a recession and it impacting their industry. So they better get the numbers in because it's going to be a long ride. Unfortunately, for these newer brands that are just popping out, I think that they're going to have a really, really hard time in the next 18 months to 2 years. And hopefully they can sustain. It's kind of funny that Don Doroteo wasn't there. It's a brand that does really well for us. And it sucks. I didn't know that they weren't there, and they have some access to some really good tobacco. So there's a lot of challenges in this industry.
Was that the booth that had like the campfire kind of display, that natural like square thing like the year before?
Well, they had like
I'm
they
trying
had
to-
like it was more tobacco oriented. It looked almost kind of like a hut, but like Wildfire was more camping scenario as far as
Right.
the overall aesthetics of the booth.
And that was
So
Jeremy from Caldwell, right?
Yeah.
It was Wildfire.
Yep.
yeah,
Was he at the
you
show
know,
himself?
I didn't see him.
I didn't
Okay.
see him
Doesn't mean he wasn't there. Just I didn't see anybody that didn't come
I
sit at
didn't
my
even see you, dude.
Right.
Which is so yeah, he could have been there, but I didn't see him. It's just, but normally that's not using Jeremy as the example, but that's usually what happens is they just slowly kind of fade out. And man, this is a tough industry, boy. I got to tell you, on every avenue, from a retailer's aspect, from a manufacturer brand owner's aspect, even from a media aspect, Coop's sandwiches get tracked higher than some of his aspects on cigar media.
It's true.
And that's crazy to me. And the thing that I continue to preach, and I will preach probably until the day I die or the day I quit out of this industry, which I don't see that happening anytime soon, is that we got to build the pie. We got to make it bigger. We all have to work together to create that additional exposure. And, that in itself is extremely difficult and requires a lot of work. And on a retailer level, educating those consumers to consume more, those consumers to bring in friends to be part of it, for brand owners to attach to show their passion to people that aren't into cigars to become into cigars. One of the topics of discussion that I just recently had is, there are places where I always bring cigars, and I'm sure you're the same, Steve, and I'm sure everybody on this panel is, hey, wherever you're going, there's potential for cigars to break out, and we're going to hang out and have a good time, right? But sometimes even those guys that are cigar guys, when you bring them in with people that aren't cigar smokers, they don't talk about it. They don't want to say that they smoke cigars. I'm like, well, why not? What's the problem? And that stigma on such a national
Like to
level,
answer that. It's because they're a bunch of fucking pussies. No.
right? Right. I agree. I totally agree. And sometimes that's the statement that I will say, but you try your best to encourage that because, what's our consumer level? I think it's probably 5% of the population.
If even.
If even, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if it was 8%. You know what I mean? Huge numbers. And I'm talking about on all aspects. Your low end cigar consumer, your bundle guys, and then your premium guys.
Right.
So that's what I want to see, man. I just want to see it more accepted. So,
Let's talk about some of the spectacles. So this could be celebrities, products, reveals, all those different things that kind of pop up at the trade show. I know.
Fabergé egg.
There you go. That's one. Fabergé eggs.
Fake Fabergé. It's not
yeah.
real Fabergé.
Alleged Fabergé egg.
Yeah.
Sort of Fabergé.
I think cigar reveals coming down from the ceiling. I think it was
Wait, there was a
Placencia's
cigar
thing.
reveal coming from the ceiling?
I think it was Placencia did. I don't know. They had a big
They got the
media
money
thing.
for that.
High altitude cigar.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what the thing was, right? Because they were talking about it's wherever the tobacco's from, like there's a higher elevation than their other farms. So
It's just a filler.
yeah,
That's a cool hook.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good cigar too.
And then
Pricey.
they had live music in their booth with I don't remember the gentleman's name that was singing, but something London. Yeah, I don't remember his name.
Yeah, Drake.
But that was, live music and stuff like that. That was cool.
The
Any other
Fabergé
things
eggs,
that jumped out at you guys?
Fabergé eggs were smaller in person than what I thought they were gonna be.
Well,
I saw.
I remember when the lighters were out, right? And the security around them. These are supposed to be even more expensive, and the security was like non-existent.
Like,
I saw
whatever.
some security. I saw some security.
Yeah, it wasn't the big dudes that were in Vegas.
No,
yeah, the
no,
dudes,
yeah,
the
right,
dudes
right.
in Vegas definitely made me feel like I couldn't make it to the door.
I
I
like-
was,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they like I was taking a picture and I wanted to make sure it was okay when I did that.
Yeah.
I was
So-
impressed with Jeremiah Marifel. He came during Passover, and he announced a cigar that doesn't have Cameroon wrapper, but with 30, 40, 50-year-old tobacco in it. And they're not going to be cheap. It's going to be like two cigars, $240, but all the money is for charity for the PCA. And he had somebody holding his microphone, and he was doing his best to be an observant Jew. And I thought that was really awesome when he announced that. And Marifel's got some deep stores of tobacco, so that will be an interesting cigar to smoke. And I like the fact that it's not $50. You want to support this cause. It's going to cost you $240 for two cigars.
For me, Reinhardt's one of the nicest guys I have ever come across.
He's
in
the
my
nicest
life.
guy in the industry.
Yeah. Not even in the industry, just I'm like, man, he is just super nice. Very considerate and just thoughtful as a human being.
Makes
so
me uneasy. He's too nice. The angle.
he's
There's
almost
something going on there.
Canadian.
It sounds Canadian.
Even his emails, he is so polite.
Yeah, it's very personable.
We did a.
It's Canadian.
It wasn't really an event. We basically gathered 8 people in a room, and we supplied some alcohol, and my wife did a charcuterie tray. And he's just a delight, an absolute delight, a gentleman. And he does a really good job.
I think as far as celebrity stuff goes, I think once again, Guy is just outworking the next closest celebrity by a factor of 100. Like, the fact that he did the opening gala and then he goes back and does the gala evening
Because he's
and
hung
then
around for more than 2 years, right? Most
Yeah.
are there for 1 year, and then they might show up the next year. But the fact that he's been kicking around for 4 years, and he seems, look, he's engaged way more than any previous celebrity that I can honestly remember since the cigar boom. There were some during the boom in the mid 90s that were really engaged, but when the boom ended, they all disappeared for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as the easy money disappeared, they walked. But I mean, it's look, the whole celebrity thing is a really hard thing. I've had a couple opportunities that I passed on because I just can't wrap my brain around it. You have to be a cigar junkie. Like, somebody that would make a good cigar celebrity. I don't know if anybody knows who he is, but well, you do know who he is. Ron Perlman,
right.
the actor.
Yep.
He's a hardcore cigar guy. He's been a hardcore cigar guy for the 30 odd years I've known him, right? But he also understands that he's not going to make any real money doing it, so he's never really gotten involved in that way. But the celebrity gig is really tough. They just never stick with it, man, because it's just too much work for too little money. So you really have to be into cigars.
Guy Fieri is a legitimate cigar guy,
Yeah.
And
there's him. There's nobody else close, right?
Yeah, there's really no second place, and nobody's going to be sitting on the trade show floor for 6+ hours doing meet and greets the entire time, right?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty good. It's pretty damn good.
The unveilings.
Yeah. Were there a lot of unveilings?
There was a
There's
lot
a
of
lot of
unveilings.
unveilings.
So I've been for
I
years
need to
saying
do
that
one of those. I've never done one of those. How's it work?
Well,
Tell me.
I'm gonna give you my
How do
thoughts
I
on this.
unveil? How do I unveil
Okay.
properly?
Who's going to tell you all the
It's
ways
not-
not to do it? So if you just do it the opposite way it tells you, you're going to get it.
Okay, because
So-
I've never done one before.
I've been advocating this for years that more companies need to unveil stuff at the trade show. However, this year we discovered it's not a very effective thing for us to cover because we don't stream live. I think it needs to be, and that's really the most effective way to do it. We also found that like Perdomo, as soon as the doors opened, they unveiled the legacy. That was the way to do it. Other companies were scattering it throughout the day, and some companies decided they were going to invite the media, but then decided to give exclusives to others, which that does bother me, right? Because we're spending time to go cover an unveiling. We're supposedly seeing this for the first time, and it's printed somewhere else already and given to that. So that's not real effective either. I personally think the unveilings need to be a day zero thing. I think you should use that first day, invite companies in who have major releases to do the unveilings at that day before the show up. Now, I know
here's my
logistically that's
thing.
tough. I know logistically it's tough, though. I know that maybe a logistically
My
tough
thing though
thing.
with the unveiling is it defeats the purpose of doing the lead up to the trade show. Because look, ideally, what I want is I want one of Jay's consumers to come in the store and says, "Hey, you see that thing that Saka had a photo of on Facebook? That's something I'm interested in. Hey, I'm interested in that." So, when you go and you do an unveiling, you're giving up all of that pre-buzz factor because look, I can say something's great, but it's not as important as somebody saying, "Hey, I really want you to bring that new bronze back in. I really want you to bring in that Fratanga." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A consumer saying that to a retailer has way more power than me doing an unveiling of the new red meat lovers. That's my perspective on it. So I find it hard to see where an unveiling would actually work to my advantage.
I think Perdomo did it right, though. I think they were, we have this legacy cigar coming out. They talked about it for about 6 to 8 weeks beforehand, but they didn't show the packaging until the show opened. And I think they did it as soon as the show opened.
Yeah, but it looked like all the other Perdomo packaging that I saw, right? It was pretty much.
That's a different. You could criticize that as a different
issue. It wasn't
issue.
differently packaged, right? It was kind of in their, and it's not a bad thing that they have. It's got great shelf presence, so I'm not knocking it. But it wasn't a distinctly wildly different thing, was it?
It wasn't from the cigars are very different than anything they've done before. I'll say that, and there's some subtleties on the box. But again, that's what they chose to do. They also did a lot of unveilings this year. They did because they had 3 partnerships. They were doing one with DuPont, one with Brassard, and one with LE Blue, and they did an unveiling of those products at each of the booths as well. And it had Carlito at all those. So.
I would also argue that unveilings work better for the bigger legacy companies that have built-in traction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We're not going to do them anymore unless there's someone really asks us to do it because they're too time consuming, and unless we're streaming it live, I don't think it's going to have the same ROI back for us. I think it's good that the companies are doing it. Don't get me wrong. I think it's good.
Right.
I like that. It gives a reason to come to a booth and everything. I mean, we had a split between DuPont and Plasencia. I covered DuPont. Bear covered Plasencia, and that was a very good unveiling. Even though they gave
you like the
cigar out a few hours.
What unveiling from? Have you ever seen a small or a mid-sized company do an unveiling that ultimately ended up being successful in your opinion?
Southern Draw for sure.
Southern Draw. That was the one I was going to say.
300 hands.
Yeah.
They did it.
Jacob's
And
Ladder. Jacob's Ladder, the Rose of Sharon.
Previous year, bear with
me. They did it right. They did it right. Yeah.
Which one are we talking about? Southern Draw what?
Oh,
they've done a few of them.
They did a lot.
They've done a
few.
Jacob's
300 hands.
I did Desert Rose. I remember I went to the Desert Rose one, and they did
Jacob's Ladder, Desert Rose, and 300 hands.
Yeah.
Were they at the show this year?
No. They haven't
but they've done it. But I think they've done the unveiling successful.
I could argue that the unveiling strategy isn't exactly a good one if they're not still exhibiting.
But I mean, those cigars had buzz for a while. Though you can't say they didn't.
But I could see Steve doing an unveiling where he's like, "Oh, and by the way, I have a brand new line that's coming out, and you have to be at the trade show to see it first."
He doesn't have a big enough booth. He doesn't have a big enough booth to do it. I mean, I gotta be honest with you.
Nuts.
You'd have it. It'd be crazy. You do that, Steve. You want 500 people at your booth. You do it.
He'd love 500 people in the booth.
What would I do with 482 of them?
But they'd all want him to talk to them.
We have 499 that go to your booth and don't get a watch, and that's a nice buzz.
Yeah.
Do you like the watch thing? Do you think that makes a difference?
It doesn't.
They were at your booth, Steve. The end of the day, Right. I saw all those people coming in there.
I get sad. I don't buy anymore. This is the first
I do it
year
to
where
pump
I
up my
didn't get enough.
AD numbers. I give away watches. It gives me access to other watches. So
Oh, I mean, me personally, I actually bought enough this year where I didn't get enough. I didn't get all the tickets that I would have earned. I'm sure Ronnie was in the same situation.
yeah,
It's
we
kind of
cap
exciting.
everybody out. It's a
Yeah,
big.
and that's fair.
I do it
What I
because what would end up happening is somebody that gives us a $300,000 order would end up with so many tickets in the thing
right.
that they would just get the watch. And the reality is,
No, that's fair.
if somebody earned that number of tickets, they can afford to buy their own damn watch.
Yeah.
Is my attitude on it. So I like it better where even our reasonable accounts have an equal shot with our big
Yeah.
accounts for the watch. Because in the end, I'm out the watch regardless. It doesn't cost me more or less, right? It's still a watch. So
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I'm sad that I don't win the watch, but I will say one thing that's nice is it's at the end of the day, you get to maybe see some people you haven't seen, and it's always fun to see everybody at Dunbarton a second time. So I think that that's why it's effective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that generally the concept is how do you train your retailer to make sure that they visit you and make sure that they're in tune to what's going on where they're incentivized to buy. So I think in that aspect, it's extremely effective. Our approach this year, we don't have watch money, but
right. I didn't have watch money 4 years ago either.
So my comment, what our strategy was, okay, if you book an appointment, we're going to make sure that you get a sling bag, right? And only brought enough sling bags for the people who booked appointments. And we had the most appointments we ever had because of it. It makes sense. If you can incentivize a retailer to attend your booth, then do it no matter what aspect or the other. And I would love a watch. It would be the only watch that I have other than my Apple Watch. So, I forgot that you were doing that this year, obviously, but I think that it's a great idea. I think there's nothing wrong with it.
It also to a smaller degree maybe, but it also is an anchor for the show for the people who do stick around for day three, because there is that aspect of, and this is the continued pressure of day three of the number of retailers that come for day one and day two and fly out the day two evening. Well, day three with the watch, there's a bunch of retailers.
We actually give away a watch every day. So, but we make the most appealing watch the day three watch.
Yeah.
To you, it was a Seiko, right? I saw it.
I like the day two watch the best. That's where I put all my tickets.
Day three watch was the Omega white dial moon watch this year.
That's a nice watch.
That was the day three watch. I like the day two watch too. I like that Panerai a lot. That was a nice watch.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit.
Eric,
go ahead.
I don't know if this fits in the rubric or you're going to get to this, but I do think a lot of the because New Orleans is less expensive, a lot of the parties that companies put on, there were more parties this year, and some of them were a lot of fun. But I don't know if you're going to get to that. It makes a big difference.
I mean, I just know that even our food bill this year was really pretty much a third.
Yeah.
And we ate better in New Orleans for a third the money than we would eat in Vegas. So look, that helps because it's a big deal. Those are, look, we do the watches because we don't do a party. Same reason why we do the opening gala, right? We don't do dinners, we don't do this. And so we take that budget that would go there to go to this, right? Just like Mike said, hey, I'm going to take my budget and I'm going to come up with this idea that works for what he's doing. Do most of the booths have some sort of like kicker like that like Mike is doing or not? Do they have some little added little thing that just is a little cherry? Because like if you don't come to the show, you can't get the sling bag, you can't get the watch, you can't get, you know what I mean? It's like I even thought about running a watch special after the show. And it's like, you know what? I'm not going to do that because it's kind of like I want to encourage retailers to come to the trade show. Even if retailers don't buy at the trade show, I think retailers should come to the trade show. I think that there's a lot of added benefit to seeing things in person, talking to people, speaking with your peers. I get annoyed by retailers that don't feel like the trade show has value because to me, it's like they don't really understand. If they're just looking at it as, oh, I'm going to get a discount, then that's just, you're missing the whole point of why you attend a trade show. And it's not like we're an industry that asks you to do a lot of these things. You basically have one time a year. Yeah, you can do TPE.
that's on you. Yeah, if you're big into international, you might do Dortmund, but the reality is for 95% of the retailers, PCAs should be your only like obligation that you have to like leave your business to go to. And I don't know of any business that you're in that doesn't have at least one or two of these things every year that are just part and parcel of you being part of the industry. So I like things that encourage people to show up, even if they don't write the order.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think that the show is super important. I think that as a brand owner or manufacturer, you really need to figure out ways to think out of the box to incentivize people to come and see and speak with you. And it's, just like you, I don't like to travel at all.
Yeah.
Like I'll go around a couple times, do a couple events a year, but more often than not, I don't want to go. So it's an opportunity to meet everybody that has seen you on social media platforms, that loves your cigars or whatever the case may be. And you can meet them all in one particular swoop, and you can have a connection with them and not be at their store 2 or 3 times a year or something like that. I think that's the more important thing, establishing that relationship, and then helping them build their business. How do you turn a $20 average a day sale into a 40? How do you turn a 40 into a 60? Not only how do you do that, but how do you do that with a consumer feeling like they spent more money and they got more value? So, all of those things don't happen if you don't leave your store, if you don't leave that
Right.
box.
If you just remain in your own bubble.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big plus. I mean, like the people on this call, how often do I get to see Aaron or John or Mike or Steve or Coop? How often do I get to see Rocky Patel or Pete Johnson or Carlito Fuente or Rafael Nadal? I mean, people that we interact with on social media all the time, and also to see retailers that maybe we went on a trip to Honduras 10 years ago, or we went on a trip in the Dominican 8 years ago, or you saw them at Pro Cigar, and see how they're doing, learn about their families, learn about things that are working in their stores. Those are the intangibles of the show that are just awesome, that really help you become a better retailer and be more connected with the industry.
Right. Learning Joshua Harbrisky's actual height,
Yeah. Well, like I buy bags from International Plastics. I talk to Craig all the time, but just being able to go and see him and spend time with him, and just to get a face behind that person that you're on the phone with 4 or 5 times a year. And then we had a lot of conversations about how to order my bags to avoid tariffs and different things like that. So it's just good to just meet people.
Let's talk a little bit about attendance, and not so much in regards to the number of people that were actually at the show. I mean, PCA did report that badges were up, retailers were up, so that's all good news. But in the past, we've had issues with media-related badging, and I don't know that was necessarily something that we saw this year. So I'm curious for Steve and Mike, did you see any kind of fringe media that
I
kind of
thought there
came
was
around your
less
booth?
print media personally.
Okay,
I
yeah.
didn't. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't feel. I felt like there weren't like a whole new crop of people getting in the media game.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a few people that wanted interviews, but I was booked, so I was like
Mhm.
saying, hey, the last 15 minutes of every hour is the best time to try to catch me. But all of my appointments are media. I don't.
Yeah.
I think I actually had two actual like real like somebody that was a retailer who was a customer that I had a scheduled sit down meeting, and that was because they specifically requested it. And it was mostly to talk about special projects, right?
Mhm.
That weren't just the normal course of business kind of thing. Um, so for me, but that was even true when I was at Drew Estate. I was always media focused when I was at Drew Estate,
Yeah.
right? So it's the same thing in Dunbarton. I look at it as an opportunity get to get my story out to a much wider audience for very little dollars,
Mhm.
right? So for me, I try to take advantage of it. Look, I can't force what you're going to take photos of or what you're going to write or what you're going to say, but if I give you content that's maybe worthy, You guys are just like I'm always chasing sales. You guys are chasing attention and clicks. So it's my responsibility to try to provide some fodder that, works to your advantage too.
Right.
So I've always been very, very media focused for the PCA trade show. Plus, two, they don't actually want me talking to customers because they do actually want people to buy shit, and
Right.
I'm always the best at that.
Yeah, I didn't see. I think that you've seen progressively over the past 2 or 3 years, the media that aren't as nearly as committed, they start to fade out and kind of go away, and that's awesome. You start to establish more relationships with the guys who are more recurring, and they become more attached because you become more attached. So those things are cool, and seeing less of the BS media, the fake media, the I'm going to be an influencer thing is awesome. So
Maybe I've turned them all off, but I didn't get any of the bimbo chicks kind of people. Those, because there was a plethora of them 5, 6 years ago, and I didn't see any of them.
Yeah.
A couple that have been
Well,
around for a while, but nobody knew because there was always every trade show there'd be a half a dozen to eight of them, on the grind, on the hustle, and I didn't get any of that at all.
did you see
Yeah.
any media in with badges that were manufacturer or retail badges? Because that seemed like it was down this year, and they were
Yeah,
committing to try to crack down on that PCA this
yeah,
year.
I don't pay attention because I know most of the people already. So I don't really pay attention to what people's names are on their badges or who they're in there with. So I can't answer that question.
I did see a couple of badges like that were, how can I put, duplicate names of people. They weren't media though. I think they were consumers. Where I just saw this name and the name I've seen this badge on a couple of other
Well,
people.
well,
That I
as much
did.
as this is going to hurt me, you get 4 badges for every 10 by 10 space you have, right? So we had a 20 by 50, which means Dunbarton is allotted 40 badges.
Wow.
We
Do
don't
you
need
need?
40. We don't need
That's
40
always
badges.
been my argument. There's too many badges that were given out to begin with. I don't understand why there's that many. So, but as long as they're being allocated for who they need to be allocated for, and it sounded like PCA was really doing. They were looking very carefully
But
at these
and
badges
I'll
this year.
admit I'm guilty of having 2 badges because that way when I lose a badge, I don't pay the $100 badge fee.
Yeah.
So I always get 2 badges. I get a Steve Saka badge, a Steven Saka badge, a Saka badge. You know what I mean? Because they don't cost me anything extra. So when I lose a badge, like, oh yeah, I got my spare badge in the room. I got my spare badge in the briefcase. So I know I get multiple badges with my own name on it, but I don't give them out to anybody. So
Right. I think that we had a couple sprung on us that we could have legitimately gotten additional people in, and it would have benefited us. I just think that, with our space, we were already kind of capped out, and it was very last minute.
I have a different take on this. I don't mind the retailer that brings some of their crazy whale customers to the trade show. I mean, if you got a customer that's spending 20K a year in your store and he's so crazy about the PCA and he wants to come, as long as he isn't interfering with business, he's just hanging around and what, gets an extra sample. Okay, who cares? Heck, that whale customer is the guy I actually want to have try a cigar, right?
Yeah.
He's the guy that's spending the most money. So I've always been very, very lax about that kind of attitude because I always figured that if that retailer feels that this consumer is worth bringing and that they're a big enough customer and they're spending their own money to come to the trade show, I'm willing to defer to that retailer. Now, if the retailer brings some guy that's a total asshole, I'll tell them, hey, that guy's a total asshole. Get him out of here. I don't have any problem with that. I know that won't be the position of some other people, but I've never had a problem, even back in the day when you talk about the media doing the trick or treat thing. That's never been a problem for me.
Right.
Whenever someone was trick or treating, I just told them to get the fuck out. Right. So I never, that was never a problem for me. And what, they're going to speak ill of me on social media? I'd love that.
Right.
So I can call them out for what a dirtbag they are. It's an opportunity for even more publicity.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. I've never had a problem. I personally have never had a problem with it. As long as they don't interfere with business. And I find the media to be very respectful. I always have. I've never had the problems that other people complain about. And I don't know if it's because of how I react Did I get a different reaction? I don't know, but I never felt like it was a burden or a problem. Never felt that way about the whale customers retailers bring. I never felt that way about the small media people. They never bothered me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I honestly think that if it was revised and actually properly strategized and kind of figured out, the Cigar Con thing wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think there's a way to do it. I just don't know what it looks like. And I would love that opportunity to speak and talk to
I'm the same way. I'm not opposed to the consumer aspect of it either. I mean, if there was a way to make it functional and work, I'm game for that. I mean, the problem is it's the cost. Adding another day is a big, big cost.
Mm.
But I understand the dilemma. But as a general concept, nah. Anything that it was the same thing you said, Mike. Anything that grows the tent, brings people in, makes them more enthusiastic about cigars, fantastic. I like anything that does that.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about scheduling then. So we already talked about the kind of the start time, end times, things like that. But this is my first trade show with the 3-day show. And that third day did seem quite light, especially early in the morning. People that rolled in a little bit later, saw people breaking down. Do you like the 3-day format still?
I
Do you
like the
wish you
three
had the
days.
fourth
I hate
day?
the days that it's over. I desperately think the show should be personally, if I had my way, I would like for the seminars and the opening gala to be Monday, the trade show day to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Mm.
And then I think you would get a lot of retailers that would stay because just psychologically, you're writing off the week already. And it
Right.
still allows you to be in your store on your best selling weekend days for most retailers. So personally, I really wish the trade show was Monday day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday's the pack out. I personally think you would get better attendance and I think people would stay longer. That's my opinion. Now, it's easy for me to say because I don't have to negotiate the contract for that.
Right.
Maybe there's a difference by doing the Saturday, Sunday, Monday that I'm not aware of. But in a perfect world, I really think a Monday through Friday schedule would be a much more effective schedule, personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think from a business standpoint, that does make the most sense because you would have retailers staying for the weekend or whatever. If they wanted to stay, they could make an additional vacation out of it. They wouldn't be cramming in these, especially when you go to Vegas and stuff. A lot of people will cram in stuff to do with their spouse or anything like that, or they'll come in day one and then they'll write off the other
Plus,
2 days.
room rates are cheaper over the weekend Vegas than they are over the weekend nights.
Yeah.
So, I mean, generally speaking, I think that would definitely be the right approach for sure. No matter when you cut it off, if you did it as a 2-day event instead of a 3-day, the last day it's always going to be less.
Yeah.
People are going to be flying out. They're going to be done. So I think the 3-day approach works. And I wouldn't mind seeing how to integrate the Cigar Con in some aspect of that too.
Mm. All right, how about after hour activities? I know
I want to hear
earlier.
what Jay's opinion. He's on the board.
Oh yeah.
Well, there is obviously a
Oh.
logical reason why we do the over the weekend thing. What is the logic?
I don't know. Maybe convention space is cheaper on the weekends. I don't really know why we do that because I don't like the schedule either. But I'm an outlier. I have trouble the last 2 years getting everything done on Monday. I wish I had Tuesday because I was in boots until 4 o'clock. So I would like more time. There were people I did not get to see, so I like the half day. But as to why the trade show has the ridiculous schedule, I don't know. It could be a money thing, or it could be that's the way we've done it since 1500 when Jose Blanco first started smoking. I don't know why we do it that way. I would love to have the show be
back
money
in the
Friday.
1500s, it was really hard to get a hold of tobacco.
It just seems logically to me a Monday through Friday schedule would be the most effective.
I agree with
For
that.
people staying longer, just mentally, you're kind of like wiping the work week away. It's not the same as the weekend. And then, I want to start the new week,
I will ask about that, but I can tell you that we've already set the dates up through 29, and I think we're working on 30. But I will ask that. If I were to guess, a lot of, what I call white collar type conventions, those typically are during the week. So if my guess is that the weekend is cheaper, because if you're working for Microsoft or IBM or JP Morgan, you probably don't want to go to a trade show on the weekend. So I would assume the trade shows are more economical, but I really don't know. But I will
I
ask,
wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, Jay.
because I know when I was a lawyer and when I was a financial advisor, you didn't do stuff like that on the weekends. That was during the work week. You're supposed to be home with your families because you had a real 9 to 5 job, unlike the job we're in now, which is 7 days a week. Um, so, I mean, I worked Easter yesterday because half the shops in town were closed. So it's really tough to say. But I personally would prefer a longer trade show. I would like to have there be like a big event the last day, but how do you do that if manufacturers have to take down their booths? So I don't know how you solve that issue. But I think most people, I know media probably prefers a half day, but I know I personally have trouble getting to all the booths I want to get to in 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, we would prefer it, but I think we all saw how the trade show was really ineffective with those half days for the past few years. So we didn't like it, but I think we all understood it had to change.
I'll tell you what, as an exhibitor, the half day was nice because it made the breakdown easier. I
Yeah.
mean, particularly with the early start on the last day, and even though the show closes an hour later, the breakdown is really, really hard, after you put in 3 days. So
Yeah.
having a half day actually made the breakdown a lot easier for the team than it is the way it is now. And going back to how you do the consumer thing, you don't do the consumer thing at the trade show in the booth. You do the consumer thing the way you did the party. You have it in a separate place where you just have tables like a big smoke. You know what I mean? You do something like that, and we all, well, Dunbarton doesn't, but we could. You'd have a pop up, and you'd have a tablecloth, and you do your thing. I mean, you don't have to like use a convention space to do that.
Yeah.
And then two, that way too, you don't have to expect every little tiny every tiny little, company that doesn't want to float that extra space or that extra time or cost to do it. You know what I mean? You could do something like that, very much like the opening gala,
Yeah.
but just with more manufacturers, obviously. Because I think I wouldn't be surprised if you would get as many as 30 that would be willing to do something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, an idea that I floated to the board, which is by no means a majority position, but if I were, Grand Poobah of the PCA for a week, I would like to see us, and Coop's probably going to be mad at me, but I'd like to see us coordinate something with Marvin, where you have the trade show and you have sort of a big smoke. And Marvin has connections with a lot of these liquor companies. He'll have access to additional principals. And I think
I'm
that,
with Coop on this one. I don't like that idea at all.
well, I mean, yeah, I know. But I think that
Well, I
they're
mean, you
good at
guys will
that.
you guys will be on your own with that, is what I'm saying. So,
I won't be able to go. I'm not
Well,
allowed.
that might change. One of these days Marvin's going to retire, but I think that
Actually, that would work out
they're
okay for me because I have my own separate thing as a satellite.
There
yeah
you go.
they're good at they have their liquor relationships. They're good with that, and I do think that if you had the consumers, if they had something that they could do that was separate, but like I said, I might be one of two people on the board that like that idea. Um, and I only said Marvin because I know the big smoke, for whatever it is, it works and it's effective. It brings consumers in, and having a trade show, let's say Monday through Thursday morning, and then maybe then you have an open afternoon where you present something either on the floor or someplace else. You show some of the new things without pricing to the consumers. And
My
then they can
one
go party in
commentary
Marvin
with
for a
that,
couple
Jay, is
days.
if you were to do something with somebody like them, it's kind of like Fiddlehead that I did, right? There were people that got Fiddlehead that aren't Dunbarton customers, but they got to participate in Fiddlehead because they're New Hampshire retailers and they belong to the Cigar Association of New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
So they're not Dunbarton customers, but they were eligible to participate in this because they were part of this other organization. So if Marvin was to do it, it can't be his big smoke rules for just his big smoke
Right.
players who only advertise in his magazine. He has to allow the PCA exhibitors have the same equal shot at participation. That would be my one comment to that.
No, I agree. There would obviously, and like I said, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Jay, you guys shouldn't even touch a consumer event for a very, very long time. And when you guys decide to do it, it should be a years effort of planning. Because I just after last time that was a disaster,
I
a
must have
disaster.
really pissed.
I don't think you guys need to go down that route. I mean, I'm sorry
Well, it wasn't
that
a disaster. It was an idea that wasn't completely baked.
Yes.
no,
I
no,
mean, nothing
your
came out of it
constituents
that
don't
actually
want it.
cost anybody
No,
any
no, no.
money. It just caused us all to talk a lot.
Your
Well,
constituents don't want it.
well,
That's why it fell apart. It wasn't because I see some manufacturers want it and a few things, but the retailers do not want it, and that's I saw it in 2013. They tried to do it with Bill Spahn, then they tried to do it in 2019. You have your membership is not sold on this yet.
well, all I know is I started talking about Marvin, and for the first time ever, my Dunbarton cutter will not shut. So I must have really
Oh,
pissed
there
off
you
the
go.
Cigar God.
Marvin's another issue, and you'll never get that. I don't think you'll ever get that.
We'll
By the way.
replace that cutter, Jay.
Yeah, they'll take over. You'll have to.
It's
You do that,
never done
and
that.
I think you're gonna have to take over. They're gonna take over your trade shows. What's gonna happen?
Yeah.
I would not do. I would not do that.
I just want to
Well,
weigh in quickly on the scheduling briefly. Obviously, totally agree with Coop. The loss of the half day was, severely impactful for media, but I think we all understand the business need and business reason for it. I think the two things that are really impactful from a media perspective is, and I was saying it sort of tongue in cheek, but the early morning access is great, but if exhibitors aren't set up to exhibit, it kind of defeats the purpose of the early access, because part of the early access is photographing booths and photographing product. And so if the booth and or the product isn't out to present, then there's no point to that hour. And so, I would say from a personal media perspective, this year felt much more challenged than last year in Vegas, where the sort of late evening finish at 6 and then the early morning where a lot of exhibitors weren't ready to exhibit. This year felt like I had much less coverage than in years past. And so, I felt it personally very challenging to cover the show from a media perspective.
Because you're
I
getting
don't want
old.
to lose
Are you
that. I don't
50
want to
years
lose that
old now,
hour.
babyface?
I don't want to lose that
Yeah.
hour.
My feet move fast though.
Now, here's the
Yeah.
funny part, though. I don't schedule any media appointments during that first early hour. I don't leave
Yeah,
that
but
open.
you're everything that you do, Steve, is a substantial outlier from I
Yeah.
think how most exhibitors handle it. And I don't mean that to, kiss your ass or anything, but I mean like you approach it in a very organized fashion. And you look at even the medium sized and large size exhibitors, I don't think they have, on average, they don't even have an approach to meet at all. Like there is no consideration to how are we going to have media come through the booth and take photos? How are we going to meet with them? How are we going to schedule with them if we do scheduling? And so, and I totally get it, because it's not an event for media; it's an event for retailers. But I'm attending as a media person, so I measure it as a media person, and so I say, this year versus last year, from a media perspective, the event was excellent. My media coverage was the poorest it's ever been, and it was very challenging for me versus last year.
I
So
would assume that the best companies, though, at media are the companies that have dedicated people, right? Like STG and Altadis and
you would think,
Adenoff and Drew
you would
Estate.
think,
They have like a right. I mean, that would be my natural assumption. Am I wrong about that?
I don't think that's necessarily true. So I would
yeah,
say
I
like
don't
some
think
of the
that's
better ones,
necessarily
like
true.
JC Newman is probably one of the better ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
So
was JC Newman always good, or are they good now because of the younger?
they've been
No,
good
they've
for the
worked at it
last
for
5,
5
6
years
years,
or
so
so.
like that.
5 years they've
Yeah.
been on it.
Yeah. They
Yeah,
weren't like that
because I
years
wonder
ago.
how Drew's influence has an impact on that. Like, for example, going back to the Fuente thing, Fuente was a relatively mediocre, struggling, decent company until you got the younger son, Carlito Jr., that started to get a little bit more marketing savvy, a little bit more media savvy. Really took that company to a much different place than the three generations before him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can also say from my own retailer base,
I do much better with the retailers that are under 50 than the retailers that are over 50.
Mm.
Right? The younger retailers, the new crop of retailers that are growing, you know what I mean? People like Mike, are much more, they're much more quick to adopt a company like Dunbarton than say some of the mid-Atlantic mafia guys. I don't know. I don't want to start naming names. So, but it kind of gives you an idea as to who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Not that they aren't good customers, but they're not the same. They're not as vested as some of the younger players. So
I'm
I would
insulted.
imagine as the companies get younger, you're probably going to see the media thing get better too.
Yeah.
John, I got to disagree with something you said. I understand that the trade show was built originally on sales, right? But what is PCA? PCA is they're an organization that coordinates advocacy, right? And advocacy is promoting the industry as a whole, right? So the trade show is something that promotes the industry as a whole. There's new products out there, there's established products out there, there's people out there. Media is the way that's covered. Media is a part of this trade show now. I don't think I understand. We shouldn't. Don't get me wrong. We shouldn't interfere with sales or anything like that. But the same, like it's for retailers. I get it, but I think it's changed so much. Look at guys like Steve. How much time he's spending with the media. Look at the amount of cycles we saw the Ford's people spend with media this year. I think it's changed a lot over the last 10 years right now. Where
But a lot
it's
of that's changed, Coop, because look, before you didn't have the easy access of social media and email and texting and all these things that you now have ways to reach out to
right.
people. Literally, retailers would come to the trade show back in 1992, and that's where they did almost all their buying and they saw everything. Because there was no way to see anything if you didn't come to the trade show. You know
Right.
what I
There
mean?
was no
So
other.
it's just how we've all moved progression wise that the show has transitioned where that's where I think the PCA is finally kind of catching up, where they're starting to understand that it isn't really the buying part is part of it, but it isn't the only thing.
It's not
You
the
know what I
only
mean?
part of it, and like I said, we
Right.
shouldn't be crossing the
It's a
swords with it
component
either.
of it.
So if someone's working on a deal, no, we don't interfere with that, and nor should we. But I think it all changed when Facebook happened, and manufacturers started putting pictures up of their booths, and that was the first time the world got to see this cigar Disneyland, and that ultimately I think led to the initial bloggers wanting to get into the show to kind of get more information on. It was before Facebook. There was no way this stuff was ever being seen anywhere. So there was a big change that happened there. So I think that we were a response to that. Is why people are thirsting for information on this every year.
I mean, personally, I think that it's on the exhibitor. If they're not prepared for you an hour early, that's their fault.
I agree. I agree with you too, Mike. On
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
that was the
I
point
don't
I
want
was
to
going
lose.
to
I don't
make.
want to lose that hour. I don't want to lose that hour. I made sure that we used that hour very productively. I'm not putting anything on you, John, but
Yeah,
we made sure we had time slots with people that we knew were going to be difficult to get to.
yeah, and I think time slots work very well. We've had this conversation numerous times, but time slots work very well for some media brands and some exhibitors. And time slots are an enormous, staggering waste of our time for a vast majority of exhibitors. And it's not to throw them under the bus. It's just that getting an exhibitor to stick to a particular time that they've agreed to when there's business in the road,
there's
I would say
one company that's
90%
been
of
difficult with that with us every year, but
not
most
I
of
would
them
say
have been
90%
good.
of the time that we've set for medium or larger brands, 90% of the time that we've set times for in the past, they weren't able to make that time.
Right.
And so the
We
reason
we
that
hadn't we didn't have that problem this year. I'm gonna be honest with you. It was one company that was difficult.
but this isn't a this year problem. The reason that Developing Palates has stopped doing appointments for the majority of exhibitors is because we've had this experience since 2018. It's only gotten worse, and so I would say 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, Aaron, we basically made a decision that we're just not doing appointments, and it's not because we think we're above it. It's because we've recognized that setting an appointment is less productive use of our time than just trying to find a slot that works, because it's just impossible to expect an exhibitor to meet a timeline when there's so much business going on. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for us.
Yeah, well,
So
I still circle back that it's on the exhibitor because look,
100%.
Steve is a great example of this. Hey, I'm not coming
Yeah.
into the show an hour early. Okay, but
Right.
here are all the times that I'm available.
Mhm.
And
We have never, in the time that I've been attending the show and the time we've been setting appointments, I've never had Steve be late for an appointment or have an appointment impacted, which is why we continue to make appointments with Steve, and it works out very well. But unfortunately, we just don't set appointments with the majority of other companies because it just doesn't work for us. It works for some brands for sure, but it doesn't work for us.
And granted, like
So-
I could understand as if a brand owner or manufacturer messes it up once or something like that, because it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, I missed you. I stepped out of the booth. I went to the bathroom. I was hungry. Whatever, those things happen. But if it happens more than once and it's regularly occurring, then you don't cover them. It's just that simple.
A
And
lot
then
of it too is managing expectations. So like when somebody, even when they're like important, somebody as important as Jay, he's like grabbing my ear 10 minutes before my next appointment. I tell him right up back, hey Jay, I have somebody coming in at 3 o'clock. Just want you to know. So they kind of, you know what I mean? So it kind of just sets the guardrails so they understand. And maybe you get stretched an extra 3-4 minutes, but pretty much at that point you can get them to move along.
Well,
You
you
know?
didn't tell the story right. Steve was very gracious. I came in, I was 10 minutes early, and Steve said, hey, I've got 10 minutes to the next appointment. Sit down. And to me, that was like bonus because I never planned to see you. So I thought you were overly gracious because you could have said, hey, I'm going to take this 10 minutes to go to the bathroom or whatever. And you
I have the
gave that
jug
time
under
to
the
us.
table, man. You empty one scotch bottle so you can fill it, man. You gotta be prepared.
So we got to learn all about your balls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was a nice touch. Yeah, Steve, I think he's an outlier. But I will say one thing about this show. I've done it, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now. But suggestions made of this show. Steve talked about not reserving your booth space during the show. That was a change that happened because of comments Steve made. Abe made comments about the show being more fun. So I appreciate the feedback because I would imagine that Steve and other manufacturers were happy that some of the booths were able to get done before the trade show.
It's really
that
tough
came
to
from
do
this
that
show.
booth appointment during the trade show. I'm glad. I don't know if everybody's getting to do it before the trade show, but
They couldn't do it for everybody, but that was good feedback that you had. So feedback, the PCA is listening,
and you get my
that's
money.
good.
You get my money 2 weeks earlier, so
That's
it
right.
works out for you guys easier too.
Money's good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So after hour activities, we touched a little bit about it. Jay mentioned about Cuban Creations and Manning's. They also had that comedy show. Did anybody attend the comedy show?
Yes,
How was that, Jay?
it was very well attended at the beginning, and they didn't handle the 90 seconds of dead space saying, "Oh, by the way, we're doing the Leaf Awards," and we lost about a fourth of the people.
Okay.
The jokes are pretty funny. I mean, they were kind of base humor, but I thought it was entertaining. It added some sparks, some things. I was disappointed because I was lied to by Garofalo that Steve was going to be there, and no one told me that Steve wasn't going to be there. But Nick Perdomo was pretty funny, though I guess it's the same old joke. I'd never heard it. I felt
He
sorry
told the
for
same joke at the
Raphael.
New England Cigar Expo.
My
Yeah,
favorite.
Dave asked me to do it, and I told him no. And then he still published my name
Right.
originally.
Yeah, I don't know why that happened. My favorite joke, and I don't remember who told it. Maybe it was Oliver, or maybe it was I don't remember who said it, but he went up to Christian and who Justo and said, "Well, we're really glad that that there's finally going to be a cigar of the year from Honduras. Congratulations to my father." I don't remember who told it, but I thought that was incredibly funny, and they took it very graciously. So yeah, they had some good pretzels. They had too much salt in them, and they had popcorn, which I thought the popcorn was fine. And they had an open bar, which is nice, and they were also handing out some cigars. I think it was a United cigar they were handing out.
Popcorn and peanut and pretzels. Okay.
But that was right before dinner, so I
Pretzels
thought
are
it was
pretty good.
fine. We were laughing. I thought it was pretty entertaining. I don't know how much PCA had input on it. I think it was sort of lock key where Dave said we're going to do what he did on his 30th anniversary. But it was well attended. It was funny. We enjoyed ourselves. Even Raphael, who I did not need, my wife did not need to hear about his exploits in the bathroom in an airplane when he had diarrhea. We still enjoyed it, and it was fun.
Are there
So
a lot
I
of
thought
are
it
there a
was,
lot of big parties and dinners? I don't know because
yes.
I'm not invited to anything anymore.
Camacho threw a serious dinner you'd have liked. They had a guy cooking steaks, and they were at Texas level, and they had some barbecue. Apparently, Davidoff had an amazing party. J.C. Newman invited 130. Well, it wasn't 130 retailers because like Carlitos people were there, but they had 130 people at the end of the Two Sisters, and the food is fantastic. And it was a great. They handed out the 125th Diamond Crown, which I heard is an amazing cigar. I haven't smoked it yet. That was awesome, and I think there were a lot of other parties like that that other people did.
Again, I think that how much less expensive it is to do it in New Orleans versus how much it costs in Vegas
Yeah.
facilitates you being able to do things like that.
Yeah, Coop, didn't you say that Justin took you out for some of Mr. Punch's wieners for dinner one night or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that wasn't an event though. That was kind of just
Oh,
Just
you
had
know,
some
that
private dinners, yeah.
that was a yeah,
oh,
we it's tough for I think they had a tougher time scheduling those type of bigger dinners because of people getting around the city and everything. Like Newman did their media one on the floor this year.
Yeah.
Which was tough for us because, it's the middle of show. I mean, we appreciate it, but it was tough because it's the middle of show hours to do that.
But
So we
but
had,
if they had thrown it after the show, Coop, I think we might not have been able to attend at all.
and I think
that's
Newman
true.
would
That's
have done
true.
it, but for the dinner because they haven't done a retailer dinner in at least a decade.
I'm buying Gus's fried chicken out next year.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's what we had the first night we got into town. So
Gumbo is
Can I throw shade at the chicken in New Orleans? Because I was going in expecting this really amazing chicken experience, and I say this as a white Canadian. I I what's with the seasoning? Like, are they afraid of seasoning in New Orleans? I didn't think they'd be afraid of seasoning in New Orleans. I was really underwhelmed. I was
You
quite
were bummed by
surprised.
the chicken. I was okay
I was
with it.
bummed with the chicken.
I gained 7 pounds in New Orleans, man. I couldn't stop eating.
Oh no, I mean, look, there's lots of
Every
great
place
stuff
I
to
ate
eat.
was fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of good food, a lot of salt.
As far
well,
as
salt at the cured meat place though is you're gonna get salt at a cured meat
yeah,
place.
but everywhere else is also it's very salty. So
oh,
were you gonna say, Mike?
What's the
kudos
best
to
place you ate, Mike?
the best place we ate was Cuchon or whatever.
That was
Yeah.
great. That we went.
The
That was great.
restaurant or
Butcherside?
the Cochon, the butcher, the place next
The
door.
rest- the
We went to
actual
the
restaurant.
butcher.
Yeah.
We went to the butcher.
We went there on the way out of town, and all I got was key lime pie. My brother and my wife got something, and I love key lime pie. It was the best key lime pie that I've ever had. The crust was unbelievable. So kudos to Ben Lee on that recommendation.
You got to have the bread pudding at Mother's because that is the best bread pudding I've tasted in my life, and I was not
Oh
expecting it
man,
from
we had
Mother's.
breakfast there too.
It was, yeah.
Praline bacon at Elizabeth's. Look it up.
Oh,
Every other place that we kind of went to, we always had bad experiences with service, and food wasn't on par.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
which is kind of surprising. But then again, like you were talking about the gravy in the veins type scenario,
Yeah.
I should have been surprised. There was this one place we went to. It was like a barn or something. It was crazy, but the food was outstanding. But generally speaking, for me, late nights, I'm not about that. I went to Smoke on the Water to go see Daniel, and
nice shot.
yeah, and the Espinosa guys were there, or Jack trickled in as I was kind of leaving, but I wasn't staying late.
I visited those guys on Wednesday, I think.
Yeah.
Before this show.
Yeah, he's got a really cool shop here, in New Orleans, which is awesome. And then I enjoy going to the Media House every year. That's always entertainment for me. It was really
I
fun.
didn't get an invitation this year.
Oh,
You have a standing invite, Steve. All you have to just say, "I'm coming tonight," and say, "All right."
yeah, I don't really get an invite anymore either. I just
Yeah.
text John, or Ben, or Aaron. I said, "Where are you guys at?"
Notice he doesn't text me now.
He doesn't respond to my text anyway. So
I haven't banned him. I mean, there's a banned list, by the way, of people from the media house. So it's just say that.
He tried to get banned this year, but it just didn't work out. So
No. There was
I don't know about
We
you guys.
we
Did you-
reinstate, and Justin was reinstated. By the way, he was banned and he was reinstated, and I may have to ban him again now. I mean, after
I probably went into this year's trade show more exhausted than I even normally am,
Mm,
but I didn't feel as beat down this trade show during the show. And I
Right.
don't know if it was because it wasn't 108 degrees,
probably.
if it was because there was no Vegas distractions. Like, I don't know why. I felt more relaxed at this trade show than previous ones. Did you guys have that experience? I felt less beat up.
I did. I totally agree. I think also though for you, there's two things. One is you get more dialed in and a little bit better at all of your execution, which makes life easier. And for two, you're down 100 pounds. That's huge, man.
Yeah, probably.
we were very
One-
beat up this year, but it wasn't the fault of like the
Yep.
PCA trade show. This was our fault, and we have to kind of reevaluate what we're doing.
I had a lot more
I was very
energy.
cognizant of my schedule this year, and
Yeah,
I called some early nights that the other guys did not. So
You
just to
did,
keep
yeah.
things even.
I mean, there were a couple of nights you saw I was going in every night to finish up some stuff, so
Yeah.
it was like tough. It was tough, but physically, we have to kind of be smarter next year how we're going to cover the show.
Yeah,
So
and going
we're gonna make changes. Yeah.
Justin,
for me, and go ahead.
You go.
I was just going to quickly say, for me, and it's just the nature of the trade show moving is west to east travel is brutal because I've gone from, basically a morning of travel to a full day of travel there and back. So that's impactful on
Yeah, welcome to our
energy
world.
levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love the
And we-
fact that Justin Andrews thought that he won that argument. I wish I was delusional as he was, because he believed wholeheartedly that he held his own. I'm like, my God, everybody took shots at you.
They
an
came
hour-
after you first, though. They did come after you first. You got to
Did,
say
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Him
that
and
was-
Bradley both came after. Bradley Rubin came after you too.
yeah, I
But
loved
then
it.
Ben kind of jumped on your side, and that was you got Ben on your side. You definitely the tables turned.
That was amazing. I loved that. Ben, absolute stud. But I love Bradley too. I think Bradley.
We do. We love those guys, but we pick on Justin mercilessly too.
Yeah.
Well, Bradley's just a sweetheart of a guy.
Yeah.
Just a lunatic. I won that.
Bradley's a sniper though. You got to watch out.
Yeah, but
he can get
Justin
you
was
from the
reinstated. Justin
corner.
was reinstated, by the way. He was on the ban list for several years.
I'm gonna help Aaron steer this back on track.
Yeah.
Did you hear any big negatives? Or like anything that you heard that was like really, because look, most trade shows, there's a lot, you always get something that like gets a lot of rants and a lot of complaints about, and I didn't hear it this year.
I didn't either. There were minor ones I heard, but nothing that I say impacted the trade show as a whole. In fact, I'm trying to rank where this one with his trade show rates in the 15 I've been to, and it could be top 3 very easily.
Yeah, I don't think I heard any negative themes through the show, and nothing big.
I picked on Jay with the popcorn and pretzels. I think that's got to improve at the awards.
Good.
But
Well, what's wrong with that? Better
because
than
you
gas
have to,
station
you gotta
nachos.
make that not much. You have to make that that could have been better, really done. I'm not gonna go there, but that wasn't if you want to build that event, you got to give a little more than popcorn and pretzels.
Yeah, I heard some negative comments about registration, obviously. The lack of ashtrays. I know Half will mentioned that the aisles were not as wide as they usually are, but I would
That's
say
a
other
five
than
at the
trade
convention
show,
center though.
yeah,
These were minor things, though. The registration would have been much worse if this was a bad trade show, though. That would have came back on you guys if this trade show was a disaster. So it is something you guys probably want to address at some point. Next year.
and I don't remember when it was, Coop, maybe 2013. Other than the trade show where we had the Alec Bradley party at the Palms, and I've been going since 2010. I thought this was the best trade show I've been to.
That's kind of what I said. That was the 13. That was a big one. Yeah, that one on the roof.
That was a fun show. I like the benefit of not breathing in recycled, extra oxygenated air. I think I had a lot more energy when I left the trade show than usual. And I don't know, it seemed to me, and I don't drink that much, but it seemed to me that people drank a lot less than they do in Vegas.
Yeah, I think we
You
need to
got to
be-
take
the edge off all those date gambling losses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you don't have that.
I mean,
So
the other
that's
thing
an
I heard was
interesting question. When was your first trade show, Jay? What year?
2011.
2011. Coop?
I've been open
two,
like 5 months.
2010, and I haven't
Aaron?
missed one.
John?
13.
John?
13 for me as well.
Mike?
Yeah, I think I'm 11 or 12, something like that.
Good God, I am old. 1992.
There you
Or
go.
Steve,
old.
I actually met you for the first time at the 2010 trade show at a Drew Estate dinner. We were in some restaurant, like I think it was on a second floor, and you and Abe was sitting right across from me. I remember that.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that the PCA needs to focus more on beefing up Antoine as far as PCA media. He had a phone. I think he needs a camera. I think he needs someone to help him and, give the ability for more PCA media coverage from Antoine. He's just one
What would
guy.
Antoine do that the other media people aren't doing, though, is my question. I have some answers to that, by the way. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I just think that he should have the ability to be a little bit more interview-esque. He should be able to cover things on a broader span. He should have more detail instead of just kind of flipping through booths so fast. I'm like, that was it. It's over. He's like, yep, that's it. I'm like, okay, I would want to see more things elaborate specifically from the PCA when it came to that media coverage. I just felt like he needs more support.
So I think the event piece, like I think as far as the booze go, I think I don't know if he necessarily needs to do that piece, but a lot of things we were talking about earlier, like covering the Guy Fieri thing, covering the nighttime events and things like that. Those are things I think that PCA media should be focusing on and not duplicating the effort that you're letting all these other media people come in and do. I mean, that's just me. Maybe focus on some of the newer companies. I think that's another one where it seemed like they would do a little bit of that before the show, but it kind of dropped. I think the ball dropped during the show.
Yeah,
So I think there's a role for
the
everything.
problem you have with the PCA doing media for the booths is then you're gonna have other booths complain that why didn't you cover me?
Yeah.
It's true.
Whereas look, it's different when it's you guys. You're your own entity and you choose who to cover and who not to cover. But if it's a PCA person and then they don't cover XYZ and they happen to be a big exhibitor, they're gonna get pissed off. Like, really? You didn't cover me?
I do want to mention one thing. Sort of, this is a commercial. I don't know if you guys know this, but Mary Sarmack and Todd Nafee and Scott Regina, those three people went to every one of the 70 new exhibitors, and that I thought that was just above and beyond. I know Mary said she had to do 25, but they went to every one of the 70 new exhibitors, and I thought that was a cool thing they did that they had never focused on that before.
I like that. I like that.
I mean, Joshua stopped by our booth, which was awesome. PCA is doing a lot of things right. They really are.
They are. Yeah, they are.
All right. And I agree with you. Antoine does need help. We are working on that because he needs one or two people working for him. Yeah. And we're building towards that because they ask one person to do all of that. Plus, he also helps with a lot of other things. He's got his plate full 3 or 4 times over.
Yeah. And let's get him a real camera.
But there's things you guys could shed from him that I don't understand why the PCA is doing.
Get him a body cam.
Why is he doing press releases? That makes no sense.
Well, to be kind of devil's advocate in that aspect, if PCA had a plan where they actually covered all the booths, I don't know what that would look like, but at least they could set a standard. If the day ever came where you said, "Hey, you're done," and Half-Wheel just blew up and they didn't want to cover it anymore, that baseline still exists. If that baseline never exists, then they're solely reliant on you guys for media coverage. And I don't necessarily think that is the right approach for the convention. Are there challenges? Of course. They have to figure out a way to cover everybody? Yes. But I mean, and not only that, but what would be even better is if they offered that media platform and some of that footage to you guys. Like, hey, I didn't get to hit this booth, right? I would like to offer some of your coverage for me to share and use it on ours, right? I think that would be beneficial for the industry as a whole.
It could. Certainly it could. The one thing I'll say is I just think we look at the cost of covering this trade show, and there's a cost per booth that I've calculated, and basically, I applaud what Half Wheel does. I don't see it very profitable doing what they do, and we'll never do that because it's just we just can't see the profitability in doing that. It just takes away from too much stuff. I mean, even if I had a bigger team to do all this stuff, I don't think it would be worth it. I mean, they must figure a way it's worth it for them, and God bless them for doing it. I just haven't seen that value to get out of it.
Do they
Right.
cover
So
every booth?
They don't get everybody, but they
That'd be
try.
very difficult.
Yeah.
We're about at 70 to 80 booths. That's way too much even for us because it's so much work afterwards to do it.
right, you actually need like a team of editors.
Yeah.
We have yeah. I mean, this has been a post production has been a challenge for us this year. We had two teams doing so. We produced more content. Is what happened, but now it's twice the amount of post production we have, and a lot of writing we're doing. So
Less
we have to
bisque
kind of
reviews. That's the
yeah
answer, right?
yeah. So we look at companies. You know, if companies really only communicating with us one day out of 365 days a year, and that's the trade show, we have to look at that and say that's probably not where we want to spend our time. So that's just the reality of things. It's not that we don't want to cover you. It's just what do we do for those companies that are supporting us the other 364 days a year? So that's where it becomes a challenge for us
Yeah.
with
So
that.
wouldn't it be nice if PCA covered all of it, where they offered a service and like let's say one or two of these brands they popped and they weren't on your radar, and you know, hey, maybe you're interested and getting that information, having some of the access to that raw footage would be beneficial to you, you know, and you're not at the expenditure of I have to cover absolutely everybody, but you're still providing more content and good content for your everyday consumer.
Can I ask a question? Coop, when you go to Pro Cigar, do they provide things like that for you, like videos and pictures,
Yeah, they do.
or not?
They do. They
Um,
do. They provide
okay.
us that, and they give us access to that, and we basically just attribute it to them. But they give us the photo stuff, a lot of the photo stuff too. So, and that helps, particularly at some of the, you know, especially the night events. That really helps out a lot because they do a great job at that. So, yeah, they give us that access.
They
There
do
you
a
go.
lot of things well, except for they don't turn down the volume enough.
Right?
Oh, that's an industry problem.
Um, you know, and I have actually mentioned at a couple of board meetings that we should study how Pro Cigar throws parties. And one of the things Joshua did this year is he took some staff to Pro Cigar and Puro Sabor to learn how to throw a better event. And I think that, you know, credit goes to those folks for learning some of that, because Pro Cigar, I think they have the best
I was
event in the
saying,
industry in the world.
Pro
They
Cigar. You want to follow their example, not Puro Sabor.
No,
Oh, no, yeah, they do a great. I mean, Josh was actually
I've
we
done
were
every
at
Sabor since the beginning. Oh my God.
we were at one seminar and I was there with Josh and I went up to him afterwards and I saw the wheels turning. It was this Hercott seminar. I said, "You need to bring this to PCA somehow." Because I think it would absolutely be that great interactive thing that Aaron was talking about.
oh,
So,
that brings back a point. Something that I think we totally didn't do a good job on this year, besides the silent disco, was we were auctioning off one of the humidors, and then the other humidor we didn't get the cigar. We get an F on that, and we will improve on that next year.
yeah, that was part of my whole concern about covering that because we just didn't really have the context of what the whole
Because
project
you had
is.
to go to the app and sign up for it. And by the way, Steve, this Noctua
I
tally that
didn't
I
even
got
know
at
there
the
was
show
an
is very
auction.
good. There
You
you
know there was
go.
an auction, Mike? What was the auction for?
No idea. Didn't hear anything about it.
A humidor that was made by Cooper, know the name of the company.
He
Humidor
made a
Group.
group. He made a group. Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea was that they were going to get some rare cigars. I won't mention the manufacturer, but there would have been a demand. But yeah, Pro Cigar does a very good job um, with that. I don't think I'm revealing any secrets. I know that I think we announced it that we are forming a 501c3 to do some charity work, and that will also help with some advocacy issues as well because of the way that you could fund it. But I do see us doing more types of things like that because I think Pro Cigar and obviously the Habanos Festival do a very, very good job of raising money for charity and awareness of cigar smoking.
We have good factory tours at the Perosa board, though.
Well, if they'd ever respond to my emails, I'd go.
Yep. Well, yeah, that's been their problem. But Pro Cigar is also more. The factory tours have a festival atmosphere to it too. So
It's a much better organized event.
yeah, they know what they're doing with that. Yeah.
Well, they also have the infrastructure.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah,
They've been doing it a long time, like 20 years as
but
well.
while we're criticizing the PCA, I will take a shot at Pro Cigar. Where's Pro Cigar's media statement about tariffs? That disappointed me that them and the Nicaraguan folks and the Honduran folks. I would have liked to have seen some united voice about tariffs, and I've seen nothing from any of those three countries, and that's disappointing to me. Since we're more than happy to throw PCA under the bus about where we dropped the ball.
I think the answer to that is I think they just kind of it was kind of blindsiding, and I don't think everyone's wrapped their head around it yet. I have no idea how other companies are going to respond to the tariffs. I really don't. And I've only heard, I think Skip has a position on it. I haven't heard his position, but I was told that he did already make a statement about it, what he intends to do. I know we made a statement about what we intend to do. I don't know that I've heard anybody else yet actually kind of put pen to ink and say this is what we're going to do yet. I think
We were
everybody's
told
playing it by ear.
Fuente Newman, I don't know if you guys know this, but Arturo Fuente is one of the very few companies that did not raise prices this year. And my father also. And both those companies have said to their retailers that if the tariffs go through, they're going to have to raise prices. And JC Newman, who did raise prices this year, they also said that they're going to have to raise prices if the tariffs stay. I haven't heard from any other major companies one way or the other yet.
I think it's very hard to imagine that you can't. I mean, just looking at the math on my end, I don't know how most manufacturers, brand people are going to be able to avoid raising prices. I don't. It's just the type of fat at that end is just not there to suck up, a 10% FOB hit or an 18% 18% is just completely unfathomable. So, and I think also, I don't think that even the price increases that you've seen, I know that at Dunbarton, we're still not equal to the margins we were making in 2019, even with all the price increases, because inflation has really outpaced the price increases. So what you've been waiting for is you've been waiting for inflation to stabilize so that you hopefully can take a couple small little price increases and kind of get back to even is what you're kind of hoping to have happen. And that just hasn't been the case. Inflation kind of stalled a little bit first half of last year. Things seemed like they kind of stabilized. But by the time we got to the back half of last year, it was like we were back off to the races again. It felt like right now, things seem at this moment to be stabilizing again on my end when I'm looking at my costings. But of course, now we have the tariff cost, right? Potentially so. Who knows? So I'll be very surprised if most brands don't do some sort of tariff price increase. I just don't know how they're going to treat it. Are they going to? The other thing too is it also depends on how you're paying for it, right? If you're a company that's leveraged and you're financing your finished goods, which a lot of companies do, then you're paying interest rates on top of your inventory, right? So it's not just a question of, oh, it's the tariff, it's now the extra interest rate on the higher money that you're spending for the same amount of product you had before. So there's also a cash utilization question. Now, for us, we don't have any debt. So it's really just a chunk out of the operating income that, okay, we're going to have less operating capital to work with, but we have enough to handle it. I don't know that that's going to be the case for everybody because if they're financing, which a lot of companies do, even big companies, they finance their inventory because it just makes fiscal sense to do so. It would now mean that they would be paying interest rates on top of the tariff. So they may not be able to pass the true cost of the tariff on directly. So yeah, I think it's messy. I just think people haven't wrapped their heads around it yet.
I think the other thing that's also interesting to consider is if the FDA user fee goes away, it's in entirety, and what that looks like as far as a level of impact per percentage.
Well, we haven't been paying the user fee for about 6 months now, so we haven't they haven't collected any user fees, but the user fee is relatively negligible. I think the highest user fee we paid worked out to about 8.7 cents a cigar. And at the low point, I think we were sitting around 4.2 cents. So I think the average user fee we paid was pretty much dead middle of those two numbers. Um, so I don't think the user fees went away. I think that manufacturers did not kick back the user fee because they were never making up enough against inflation on the price increases. They were just saying, okay, it's 7 cents. We really could use that 7 cents. So I don't think the user fees have really, but it's not the same as the tariff. The tariff is a big number. Tariff
Right.
isn't.
I know that they're not they don't equate as far as an equivalent is concerned, but if that was factored in and that percentage was even nominal, it could be factored in when a brand owner manufacturer goes to adjust for the tariffs. And instead of doing the full percentage that they're originally going to do, that could change it to be a little bit less and it still have the
But
same
what I
price.
would say to you, Mike, is I think that number has been factored in. I think the fact that you don't pay the user fee anymore made your price increase a little smaller than it would have been. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you're always looking at your cost of goods on, on just an everyday constant computing thing, right? So I think that the not that you're not paying that 4 to 8 cents in user fee. I think that's just been reflected in instead of the company taking a 3.87% increase, they took a 3.62%. You know what I mean? I think the user fee's been baked in. I just know that the way most manufacturers think of these things is they just look at them as hard costs, right? They don't look at them as profit centers. The mentality as a manufacturer is not the same as a retailer because our needs are different than a retailer. So I don't think anyone ever looks at like box increases, trip of price increases, in the shipping increases that we've all been dealing with as, oh, this is an extra way for us to make profit. I think you're always adjusting the prices up to try to get back to kind of where you were, you know. It's just it's I'm sure there's some companies out there that have margined these things, but I think it's probably pretty rare because we're always worried if our cigars get too expensive, they're going to stop smoking our brand and they're going to smoke another brand, right? Because that's the risk for us. Whereas for a retailer, there really is no risk. If Sin Compromiso get too expensive, they'll sell less Sin Compromiso, but they'll sell a brand that's priced $3 less. You know what I mean? And they still make the same margin on the $14 cigar from a P&L point of view as they did on the $18 cigar. So I think that I think it's really unusual for a brand, with the exception of like, okay, it's your 10th anniversary, so you can ding them a little, or it's your whatever, it's your special humidor that you're only making 200 of, and it's coming in this, you know what I mean? Those things obviously get some like premium pricing on them, but they're such a little volume item because really what they're concerned about is, their core turning, the things they're doing large volume on. I've never, we've never really, short of the boom years, I don't know, man. I don't think there's really an awful lot of gouging going on by any of like the established long-term players because it just doesn't work to their benefit. You're always afraid to raise prices. You're not it's not to your benefit for cigars to get too expensive. It doesn't help anybody because we're a turn industry. We make a consumable commodity. Granted, a luxury consumable commodity, but it's a commodity. We need people to buy it, smoke it, buy it again, smoke it, buy it. You know what I mean? So you always you want to try to make that as you don't want to make that too painful.
Right.
You just don't because it doesn't work to your advantage in the long run. And look, I say that as a guy that sells relatively expensive cigars, right? But I don't even think my cigars are that expensive anymore compared to where the market has gotten to. Seems like a lot of brands have kind of caught up to the price point that I kind of operate in. But yeah, user fees though, it's too user fees. Tariffs are too big a whack. It's too much. It really is. And particularly when it's not a 5% increase on Trippa, it's a 5% or a 10% or 18% increase on everything.
Right.
I mean, it's a serious whack. It really is. It's a big number. That's why Saka cons are going to be $42 a piece.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the future. So future trade shows. So next year, still in New Orleans, a week later in April, and then 27 and 28 to the Las Vegas Convention Center early March, and then 2029 back to New Orleans. Thoughts on timing?
We know it's early March for Vegas, the return to Vegas.
Yes, I believe that was what was mentioned, right, Jay?
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, Josh was very transparent about dates, which, by the way, very appreciative. This is the first time I think in PCA trade show history we've got both the locale and the dates well in advance of the trade show.
So we know the dates for the 27 trade show and the 28, or just the 27?
27 and 28.
Oh, what are these dates?
Well, now you've caught me flat-footed. Give me 1 sec. I will pull up my notes. One moment, please. Someone please fill the dead air here.
Yeah, I believe it's first week for 27. I believe it's first week of March for sure.
Yeah, it's March 5th to the 8th for the
Ooh, that's
2027.
early.
It's March 3rd to the 6th for the 2028. And 2029, the same convention center, but the date is to be announced. And the 2026 convention, of course, is April 17th to the 20th.
You went too fast for me.
Sorry. I read it back exactly as Josh did it in the meeting. So 2026 is April 17th to the 20th.
Yep.
2027 is March 5th to the 8th.
Got it.
2028 is March 3rd to the 6th.
Got it.
And 2029 is TBA.
Awesome.
So
Ooh, those early March dates, those are going to be real pressure on the retailers, cash flow wise. That's gonna be a tough swallow for them.
bring some hoodies to Vegas is my recommendation.
Weather will be great.
Sure.
Cash is going to be thin. First week of March. Whew.
It was thin this year.
Yeah, and that's a whole what? Almost 5 weeks later.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to be really strategic with those ones. Wow.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything that absolutely needs to change about the trade show going forward?
Yeah, no early March dates. Those are ridiculous. I can't imagine the retailers or the exhibitors liking that early March date. It's too soon in the year.
All right. How about any wish list items? Not major items, but just things that you'd like to see a little different.
I already said I want Monday through Friday, but I'm not getting that. I'm already getting early March over the weekend.
Yeah, like I said, my thing is I'd like to see the unveilings done on day 0, and encourage that. Maybe some incentives for the last day is maybe if a company wants to hold a release back for the last day, but I think that's gonna be tough to get anyone
That's
to do.
terrible. How's that going to work?
Yeah, I mean it would have to be something limited, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, the only companies that may have enough weight to pull that is Fuente or Padron.
Right, I was just gonna say there's not a lot of that, but I think in general I'd like to see the unveilings move to day 0 and be more of a show and part of the whole day 0 experience. And then some of Aaron's ideas around making it increasing the interactive and competitive natures of day 0, I think would help as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for just beefing up PCA's content media coverage. I think that would be a bigger thing, even if you just hired a team during the show and didn't have them there throughout the year. You said, hey, we're going to pick you guys up. You're going to get all the content. You're going to handle the editing. Antoine is in charge, something like that. I think that would be very beneficial for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I have no feasible plans. I've tossed around a lot of things over the last 2 years, but none of it is feasible. So when I have a feasible, workable suggestion, I'll definitely forward it.
Some type of water slide in the middle of the convention.
I don't think with this group, I don't think anyone wants to see that.
You know,
Midget tossing for discounts. Yeah. Mud wrestling for, yeah, sure. Why
Yeah.
not?
Dream Machine.
Dream Machine. Oh my
I'm
God.
joking.
oh, please no.
I would like to see and I have no idea what the other board members think, but I would like to see the awards thing become more effective. You know, maybe include like a roast, uh, maybe have some manufacturer and broker and sales rep awards, and to make that a bigger event that's not on the trade show, that's not in the convention center, that's held someplace else. I think that would be kind of fun to have more of a party. You know, something akin to, like, you know, we talked about, you know, the Alec Bradley party at the Palms. It would be cool to have some sort of event that involved music and fun and whatever, but I don't know if that's available in New Orleans or
I
not.
mean, closing gala is the way you go with that. The dilemma you have is it's the breakdown of the booths that's going to interfere with the manufacturers being able to even participate.
Yeah.
Well, we'd have to
That's
do it
what.
Sunday night, and then we'd open the trade show floor on Monday at 5 a.m., you know, just to be fair.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what Partagas and Habanos has done very effectively. Is you have an opening gala and a closing gala specifically to make sure that everyone is staying for the full gala experience, and that's the whole reason you bookend that like that.
But yeah, if you had a closing gala with maybe a few sponsors, but it'd have to be something that people would want to go to.
Yep.
And I think that would benefit everybody, because then there's a reason to hang around till Monday. Because I don't know what the numbers are, but I imagine 30 to 40% of retailers, they're out of town by Sunday night. I could be wrong about that, but I think
I'd be surprised if it wasn't quite a bit higher than that. But yeah, I think and that's going to be the sort of number one thing. And I think I can't remember who said it. It was another exhibitor who said that the biggest challenge is going to be protecting that third day from getting eroded like the half day was. And so that's going to be, I think, where a lot of creative energy is going to have to be focused, is seeing, you know, how can
This is where I have a problem with that. As a retailer, you really can't cover the whole trade show in 3 days already, right?
Mhm.
So if you're doing your job as a retailer, it almost seems like it should be like a built-in onus on you to do the day three. I mean, I'm not opposed to coming up with an incentive, a gala or whatever to keep them around, but at the same point, it's always the same. Your better retailers put in the effort and they do the thing that they're supposed to do. You don't have to worry about those retailers. And look, there are retailers who are sucking wind and their businesses continue to decrease. And guess what? Many of them are the least active, the least engaged, the least informed, are the ones that are sucking wind, right? So trying to convince someone to do what's right for their own business, you know, you can put a lot of carrots out there, but in the end, you have to take some self-responsibility to do what you're supposed to do. It is your job. This is how you earn your living. You do have customers to serve.
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be some. I mean, you can only do so. Look, if the PCA doesn't do anything that makes the show annoying or too more expensive than it needs to be, or a total cluster muck, you know what I mean? That's really kind of what you need. It's at some point the retailers themselves have to take self-responsibility for doing what the fuck they're supposed to do.
Mhm.
That's my attitude, but granted, this is why they don't let me talk to customers. So I
All right, gentlemen, I think we've reached the end. So try to keep this under 4 hours so we don't get compared to Bears long shows. But thank you all for participating, and hopefully maybe we can all do this again next year around the same
we're gonna
time.
end on that really positive note of mine. That's kind of sad.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
we
Absolutely.
not have somebody say something happy.
Who's got
It was a
some?
great PCA, man. It really
Yeah,
was.
it was.
I have to tell you, honestly, I'm genuinely looking forward to next year's in New Orleans. I really truly am.
Yeah.
I think that when people hear how good this year's trade show is, I hope it brings more people to the table next year, because honestly, I think as a retailer, I think you're making a mistake to not attend. And I think a lot of the kinks are getting better. I think everything is more positive. Are there things you can nitpick at? We're always going to be able to nitpick. That's what we do. We're judgmental. But in the end, I think we can, from what I'm hearing, seems like everybody felt in whole. This was probably one of the best trade shows in a very, very long time.
Yep, for
Yep.
sure.
Trending in the right direction for sure.
Yeah. So there you go. That's a little happier. We can end
Yeah,
on
there you
that.
go. That's a good, yeah.
Gotta be telling the
Perfect.
retailers they suck. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Tell us more about the shitty retailers, please. We want
Yeah. All right. Thank all you guys. I want to thank everybody that's been watching, that tuned in early or late, or is going to catch us on replay. But appreciate it. Again, thank you for all your time. And yeah, great PCA. Looking forward to next year's. And we will catch you all in the next one.